Welcome to our channel. Hollywood Movie Review. Bad Boys for Life 2020 Movie Review. Bad Boys for Life is a 2020 American buddy cop action comedy film that is the sequel to Bad Boys 2, 2003, and the third installment in the Bad Boys franchise. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence reprise their starring roles in the film, which is directed by Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah. Teresa Randall and Joe Pantoliano also reprise previous roles and are joined by Vanessa Hudgens, Alexander Ludwig, Paula Nunez, Charles Melton, Kate Del Castillo, and Nicky Jam. The film was produced by Smith, Jerry Bruckheimer, and Doug Belgrad, with a screenplay written by Chris Bremner, Peter Craig, and Joe Carnahan. In the film, Miami detectives Mike Lowry and Marcus Burnett investigate a string of murders tied to Lowry's troubled past. A third Bad Boys film was contemplated following the release of the second film in 2003, with Michael Bay stating he would be interested in returning to direct, but budgetary constraints led to stalled efforts. Over the years, a variety of writers and directors were attached as the film went through multiple attempts to enter production. The project was eventually finalized and greenlit in October 2018, and filming began the following year, lasting from January to June 2019. Principal photography took place in Atlanta, Miami, and Mexico City. Bad Boys for Life was theatrically released in the United States on January 17, 2020, by Sony Pictures, releasing under the Columbia Pictures label. The film was generally well received by critics and grossed $426.5 million worldwide, becoming the third highest grossing January release of all time. It was also the highest grossing film of the year domestically in the United States, the fourth highest grossing film of 2020 and the highest grossing film in the franchise. A sequel, Bad Boys, Ride or Die, was released on June 7, 2024. 17 years after Johnny Tapia was taken down by Miami PD detectives Mike Lowry and Marcus Burnett, Isabel Aredes, widow of cartel kingpin Benito, escapes from a Mexican prison with the aid of her son Armando. Isabel sends Armando to Miami, tasking him with recovering a substantial stash of money Benito had hidden, as well as assassinating the people responsible for his arrest and eventual death in prison. Isabel also demands that Armando kill Mike last. In Miami, Mike accompanies Marcus to the birth of his first grandson. Marcus wants to spend more time with his family, so he tells Mike he intends to retire, to Mike's chagrin. During a foot race against Marcus to prove who is faster, Mike is shot by Armando and left in a coma for months. Chastised by Isabel for targeting Mike first, Armando continues to assassinate other targets on his list during Mike's convalescence. Following Mike's recovery, he is determined to seek revenge and unsuccessfully attempts to recruit the now retired Marcus, which causes them to fall out. An informant gives Mike the identity of arms dealer Booker Grassi. Realizing that Mike will not heed orders to avoid the investigation, Captain Conrad Howard reluctantly allows him to work with the tech-driven team in charge, Advanced Miami Metro Operations, AMO, led by Mike's ex-girlfriend, Lieutenant Rita Secata. While the team surveils Grassi at an arms deal, Mike intervenes after determining the buyers intend to kill Grassi, but he fails to save him. Later, Marcus is called by Carver Remy, an old informant who believes the assassin is after him. Marcus and Mike travel to Carver, but he is killed as they arrive. Armando escapes after a fist fight with Mike. Captain Howard later reveals his intentions to retire, advising Mike that he needs to find a path forward in life. Moments later he is assassinated by Armando. The captain's abrupt death pulls Marcus out of retirement, but he convinces Mike to work as a team with AMO. They track down Grassi's accountant, who leads them to Lorenzo's Zuelo Rodriguez. Infiltrating Zuelo's birthday party leads to a destructive car chase. Armando arrives in a helicopter to rescue Zuelo but kills him when he blocks Armando's way to shoot Mike. As he lines up a shot, Armando tells Mike "Hasta el fuego." Gunfire from Marcus creates cover for Mike, who falls into the ocean below. Ammo is shut down because of the failed operation. In private, Mike reveals to Marcus that Armando may be his son. He explains that, 24 years ago, before partnering with Marcus, Mike worked undercover in the Aretas cartel where he met Isabel. They fell in love and intended to run away together, using Hasta el Fuego as a made-up secret catchphrase. Mike ultimately remained loyal to the police, realizing how dangerous Isabel would become. Despite Mike's opposition, Marcus and Ammo join him in Mexico City to confront her. At the abandoned hotel, Mike meets Isabel and scolds her for concealing the truth from him. A shootout quickly ensues between Ammo and Isabel's men. Marcus shoots the pilot of Isabel's escaped helicopter, causing it to crash and start a fire. Marcus confronts Isabel, while Mike tells the truth to Armando. In a fit of rage, Armando beats on him, who refuses to retaliate. He demands the truth from Isabel, who confirms that Mike is his real father. Realizing the task he spent a lifetime training for was a lie, Armando tries to reason with Isabel, leading to her inadvertently shooting him while aiming for Mike. Enraged, Isabel attempts to shoot Mike again, but Rita shoots her, and she falls to her death into the flames below. Sometime later, Rita is promoted to captain, while Mike and Marcus are placed in charge of Ammo. Mike visits a remorseful Armando in prison and offers him a chance to earn some redemption on a new case, which he accepts. Michael Bay, the director of the first two Bad Boys films, stated in June 2008 that he might direct Bad Boys 3, but that the greatest obstacle would be cost, considering both Will Smith and himself demanded some of the highest salaries in the film industry. By August 2009, Columbia Pictures had hired Peter Craig to write a script for the sequel. In February 2011, Martin Lawrence stated that the film was in development. Following several delays, Jerry Bruckheimer announced in June 2014 that screenwriter David Guggenheim was working on the storyline for the sequel. 2 months later, Lawrence said a script had been written and roles had been cast. The following year, in June 2015, it was reported that director Joe Carnahan was in early talks to write and possibly direct the film. Sony Pictures Entertainment announced a short time later, in August 2015, that there were plans for 2 sequels, with Bad Boys 3 scheduled for release on February 17, 2017, followed by Bad Boys 4 on July 3, 2019. In early 2016, Bad Boys 3 was pushed to June 2, 2017, with no update on the release date of Bad Boys 4. Producers had planned to begin production in early 2017. Another delay surfaced in August 2016, when, to avoid competition with the upcoming DC Comics film Wonder Woman, the studio pushed the film's release to January 12, 2018. It was also revealed that the film would be titled Bad Boys for Life. In an October 2016 interview on Jimmy Kimmel Live, Lawrence said filming might begin in March 2017. In December 2016, an updated release date for Bad Boys 4 was set for May 24, 2019. Sony announced in February 2017 that the film's release would be delayed for a third time to November 9, 2018. The following month, Carnahan left the movie due to scheduling conflicts. In August 2017, Sony removed the third film from their release schedule, and later in the month Lawrence said the film would not happen. Planning resumed in February 2018 as Belgian directors Adil El Arbi and Bilall Fallah were signed, after development on Beverly Hills Cop 4 stalled, in place of Carnahan and Smith and Lawrence were confirmed to reprise. Geek Worldwide reported that the third installment in the Bad Boys franchise would film from November 2018 to March 2019 in Miami and Atlanta, with the release date scheduled for January 17, 2020. In October 2018, Variety revealed that Sony was close to green-lighting the film's production. It was reported in December 2018 that Joe Pantoliano would reprise his role as Captain Howard from the previous films. Kate Del Castillo joined the cast in early 2019, and it reported soon after Teresa Randall would reprise her role as Marcus' wife, Teresa, marking her first film appearance in 10 years. Principal photography began on January 14, 2019, in downtown Atlanta. Shooting also took place in Mexico City and State of Mexico in April 2019, as well as in Miami, wrapping on June 7, 2019. Cinematographer Robrecht Javier shot the film with Sony Cine Alta Venice digital cameras and Panavision Primo G and T series anamorphic lenses. The film was composed by Lorne Balfe, whose new music was integrated with Mark Mancina's themes from the first film. Both trailers for the film include a remix/mashup of Bad Boys by Inner Circle, the franchise's theme, and Bad Boy for Life by P. Diddy, Black Rob, and Mark Curry. The official soundtrack album to the film, Bad Boys for Life, the soundtrack was announced by its executive producer, DJ Khaled, and released on the same day as the film. Black Eyed Peas and J Balvin recorded a song titled Ritmo, released October 11, 2019, which served as a lead single for the film's soundtrack. The soundtrack also features tracks by many artists, including Nicky Jam, Quavo, Rick Ross, Meek Mill, Buju Banton, Bryson Tiller, City Girls, Pitbull, and DJ Durrell. The first official trailer for Bad Boys for Life debuted on September 4, 2019, and its second trailer was released 2 months later on November 5. Its world premiere was held at the TCL Chinese Theater on January 14, 2020. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence arrived at the premiere driving a Porsche 911 Carrera 4s with the Bad Boys theme playing loudly from the car's audio system. Bad Boys for Life was theatrically released in the United States on January 17, 2020, by Sony Pictures Releasing. Bad Boys for Life was released digitally in the United States and Canada through Premium VOD on March 31, 2020, before the end of the usual 90-day theatrical run. The film was released on 4K Ultra HD, Blu-ray, and DVD on April 21, 2020. Bad Boys for Life grossed $206.3 million in the United States and Canada, and $220.2 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of $426.5 million, against a production budget of $90 million. It is both the highest grossing film in the Bad Boys franchise and the highest grossing film released in January. In the United States and Canada, the film was released alongside Dolittle, and was initially projected to gross $35 to $45 million from 3,740 theaters during its 3-day opening weekend, for a total of around $48 million over the full 4-day milk weekend. After making $23.5 million on its first day, including $6.36 million from Thursday night previews, estimates were raised to $68 million for 4 days. The film went on to debut to $62.2 million in its first 3 days, and $73.4 million over 4, the second best opening for the holiday, behind American Sniper. It made $34 million in its second weekend and $17.7 million in its third, remaining in first place both times. The film's release in China was delayed following the country's movie theater closures that began in January 2020 as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Bad Boys for Life was eventually released in China on August 14, 2020, grossing $3.2 million in its first weekend. After the easing of initial restrictions in the U.S., the film was released in 3 Santikos Theaters locations in San Antonio, Texas on May 1, 2020. IndieWire described reviews for Bad Boys for Life as mostly positive, while Screen Rant stated the critics were generally positive. The review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes reported an approval rating of 76% based on 270 reviews, and an average rating of 6.2/10. The website's critics' consensus reads, "Loaded up with action and a double helping of leading man charisma, Bad Boys for Life reinvigorates this long-dormant franchise by playing squarely to its strengths." On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 59 out of 100, based on 46 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A on an A+ to F scale, equivalent to the first two films. Post-Track reported an average rating of 4.5 out of 5 stars, with 73% of their respondents saying they would definitely recommend it. Todd McCarthy of The Hollywood Reporter wrote that the third time really is the charm, and added, the two directors roll with ease between raucous comedy and raw drama, to considerable effect, just as they crank up the tension on any number of occasions, occasionally with palpably visceral impact. In a 2.5 out of 5 review, Michael O'Sullivan of The Washington Post explained that Adil and Bilall bring a breath of fresh air and fun energy to a franchise that felt somewhat stale, even 25 years ago, when the first film was likened, not inaccurately, to a carbon copy of Lethal Weapon. Radhian. Simon Pillai of Now earned a 3 out of 5 rating, stating that Bad Boys for Life's relationship to its predecessors becomes what The Irishman is to Goodfellas and Casino. David Ehrlich of IndieWire gave the film a B grade, calling it a fun, explosive, and even thoughtful action movie, and wrote, Bad Boys for Life doesn't aim to raise the bar on its genre or rewrite the blockbuster rulebook, but it's a blast watching Lawrence and Smith revisit these characters and find a sensible place for them in the current Hollywood landscape. Following the box office success of the third film, Smith and Lawrence announced that they would star in a fourth film, with Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah returning as directors and Bremner writing the script. The project was put on hold in light of the cancelled Batgirl film and the incident between Will Smith and Chris Rock at the 94th Academy Awards. However, the project was announced to be in development. Musician and disc jockey Amir Questlove Thompson announced that he backed out of a special appearance in the project, due to the later pre-production of the fourth film. Hudgens, Ludwig, and Nunez returned for their roles from the third film, while Tasha Smith replaced Randall for the role of Teresa Burnett, and John Sally also reprised his hacker role from the original 1995 film. Johan Gruffyut and Rhea Seehorn joined the cast in undisclosed roles, along with Eric Dane in an undisclosed villain role. Although the filming location was revealed, principal photography filming was later put on hold due to the 2023 Hollywood labor disputes in July. The film was released in the United States on June 7, 2024. In Bad Boys for Life, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence reprised their roles as two Miami police detectives fighting criminals. This time Will Smith's character, Mike, almost gets killed by the son of a dead drug dealer's wife who escapes the Mexican prison where Mike helped put her years ago. A member of a Mexican death cult, Isabel instructs her son from her hideout in Mexico City. She wants her son to target Mike for the maximum pain before he kills him, but her son jumps the gun and tries to shoot down Mike as soon as the son gets to Miami. Mike, who doesn't know the would-be killer's identity, barely survives the murder attempt. 6 months later, Mike tries to convince Martin Lawrence's character, Marcus, to come out of retirement and help him catch the killer, who's also murdered a judge and another policeman in the meantime. Marcus refuses, even when the killer strikes closer to home. Bad Boys for Life has lots of explosive action and lively humor, but it also has constant foul language and non-stop, often intense and sometimes bloody violence. However, the story contains some nicely written personal drama. Marcus, whose daughter just gave birth, wonders why Mike refuses to settle down with a woman and start his own family. Apparently, Mike at one time had a relationship with the female detective heading the team investigating the murder of the judge and the attempt on Mike's life, but he broke it off. Mike keeps avoiding the question of why he won't settle down. However, when he and Marcus learn that Isabel and her son are behind the murders and Mike's attempted murder, Mike reveals some secrets about his past before he knew Marcus. He reveals that he was the undercover cop who helped put Isabel in jail more than 20 years ago and killed her husband, who was a make drug dealer in Mexico. This revelation leads to some rewarding plot twists. Surprisingly, Bad Boys for Life has some positive Christian references. For example, when Mike's in surgery fighting for his life after being shot, Marcus goes to the hospital chapel and asks God to let his friend live. He promises God to stop using violence, and it's one of the reasons behind his increased desire to retire from the police force. His promise leads to some funny moments later in the movie when it becomes clear that Isabel isn't going to stop carrying out her ruthless desire for revenge. In fact, as the story plays out, Mike also reveals that Isabel is actually a witch in a Mexican death cult. So, eventually, the plot becomes a story of good versus demonic evil. At another point in the movie, Marcus warns Mike about going to hell if he doesn't change his ways. This dialogue about hell is turned into a potent visual metaphor at the movie's end. Bad Boys wasn't so long ago to be forgotten entirely, certainly not with that song, but a chorus of guns and explosions does have a habit of ironing out the nuance of memory. So some research perhaps is in order to see if any background information might be valuable. Key points tend to flood back with a quick Google search, and for Bad Boys the first fan review to appear is by a man called Jaden, and it starts simply, "My favorite moment in the movie is when Martin Lawrence gets shot in the rectum and his wife makes fun of him." It about sums up the level of back and forth humor between the smooth Mike Lowry, Will Smith, and his bumbling sidekick Marcus Bennett, Lawrence, that made Bad Boys such a success, much to the confusion of critics. It's a chemistry that perhaps makes you wonder why a 25-year reunion is called for, but for Smith and Lawrence it works. Sure enough, the butt jokes are back to provide that important nostalgic link. Because what is Bad Boys for Life if not a tale of overgrown children tackling a new world with old habits and discovering things don't quite work the way they used to? Because things have changed. Their trigger-happy mentality has been superseded by the Ammo Squad, employing state-of-the-art tech and a crack team headed by a flame of Mikes called Rita, Paula Nunez. Family looms large for Marcus, who is still an idiot but more circumspect in his life as a grandpa. Mike, however, has never settled down, and his recklessness is coming back to bite. 25 years ago Michael Bay equipped him with a gun, a need for speed and an uncanny ability to look cool in that radioactive Miami sunset, saying stuff like, "This shit just got real and hell no." Now he's having to dye his goatee, and after years of sending drug cartels to the clink, someone wants his head for payback. It's perhaps a sign of the times that Bad Boys for Life puts the brakes on its traditional ride together, die together mantra by exploring the possibility that Mike, far from being cool, is just a perpetual child. Karma has arrived and it's personal. "All our lives we've been bad boys," Marcus says at one point, "now it's time to be good men." It's a touching if long overdue sentiment to recognize that they might have gone a bit overboard in times gone by, and pays lip service to the different era that Bad Boys has been revived for. Boys will be boys doesn't quite cut it anymore. But of course it's a ruse. Fans of the originals will probably be pleased to learn that this is merely the setup for a joke. Be prepared to see Smith and Lawrence deploying grenades and machine guns and being fired upon by rocket launchers from choppers in the busy streets of Miami. All for a worthy cause. It's dumb, certainly, but it's also tongue-in-cheek. The carnage, the incompetence, has always been the joke, the knowledge that their successes invariably leave a trail of destruction that in any real universe would have seen these two in jail 25 years ago. Perhaps it's not too much of a stretch to call them the distinctly Miami versions of Inspector Clouseau. No, that is too much of a stretch. But at least under the direction of Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah, this is an enjoyable return to 90s blockbuster action, complete with a metallic impact font title sequence. The action is choppy but filmed with deafening verve. Through the screenplay by Chris Bremner, Peter Craig, and Joe Carnahan, banter, brutality and bromancing move Bad Boys for Life along at a cracking pace, with some nice comedic set pieces slotted here and there. The supporting cast also add their own energy and variety. All in all, Michael Bay would be proud, though a more agile touch than Bay's sledgehammer subtlety is appreciated. You would have to be a darn fool to believe that Sony thought it had a good movie in Bad Boys for Life. It's being released smack dab in the middle of the cinematic wasteland that is January, the month where bad movies go to die with little fanfare, never to be heard from again. Hell, even that fresh pigeon of Bel Air cartoon, Spies in Disguise, got released during Oscar season. Certainly you'd expect a little more release date love for the third entry of a hit franchise that stars Will Smith and Martin Lawrence as reckless cops armed with comedic banter and oodles of collateral damage. After all, its predecessors were released in April and July, respectively, and were both directed by Michael Bay. Bay's conspicuous absence added to my suspicions that there was little studio faith in this feature. Surprisingly, Bad Boys for Life is nowhere near as bad as its opening day schedule would indicate. It is the best of the three films, offering in some odd ways a corrective to the prior installments. Unlike the original, this one finds some depth in its female characters. Unlike the second, it's not an exceptionally vile mishmash of Freebie and the Bean and Scarface whose running time felt approximately 600 hours long. This time, detectives Marcus Burnett, Martin Lawrence, and Mike Lowry, Will Smith, are more mindful of how much collateral damage they do, even if the latter must be constantly reminded to temper his carnage. I didn't buy this kinder, gentler Bad Boys shtick for 1 minute, but that doesn't mean I was bored. When the climax starts laying telenovela-level melodrama atop the explosions and gunplay while openly cannibalizing ideas from Gemini Man, I had to admire the audacity of those choices. The film opens with that speeding Porsche sequence from the trailer, with Mike and Marcus employing their usual disregard for innocence while engaging in what looks like the pursuit of the latest Miami criminal. Turns out all the stunts are in service to getting Marcus to the hospital for the birth of his granddaughter. Now a grandfather, or a pop as he calls himself, Marcus re-evaluates his law enforcement career. Unlike his hothead partner, he has a wife and family and wants to spend more time with them rather than the hundreds of criminals he's been shooting. In the words of a far better buddy cop picture, Marcus realizes he's getting too old for this shit. Mike tries to change his mind. Meanwhile, something is brewing in Mexico, and I literally mean brewing. A self-proclaimed bruja named Isabel Aredes, Kate del Castillo, executes a gruesome, Silence of the Lambs-style prison breakout, reuniting with her son Armando, Jacob Scipio. It's all part of a plan to murder the people who put Isabel in prison and her husband in the grave. One of those unlucky folks is dead. Lowry, whom Isabel commands her son to kill last so he can suffer. Castillo plays her role with maximum toughness, so much so that I wish she'd just gone after her enemies herself, but that whole witch character trait had me worried that Bad Boys for Life was going to embarrassingly do for Brujeria what Steven Seagal's Marked for Death did for Voodoo. Armando executes his mother's wishes and enemies while clad in motorcycle gear straight out of Gemini Man. He violates her order of operations, however, going after Mike first. The sequences following this attack attempt to imbue the film with some real emotional stakes, and credit must be given to Lawrence for reminding us that he can convincingly navigate dramatic scenes. Screenwriters Chris Bremner, Peter Craig, and Joe Carnahan use this plot development to sneakily insert a reason for the aforementioned minimization of collateral damage in the action scenes, though rest assured, there's still enough violence for a rather hard R rating. Followers of the series will find a few Easter eggs hidden throughout. My audience laughed heartily at one that, unfortunately, reminded me of one of the worst scenes in Bad Boys 2. Despite the 25-year span between this film and the original, several cast members also return. In addition to Smith and Lawrence, the always welcome Joe Pantoliano is back as Captain Howard, the screaming police chief whose agita is exacerbated by the recklessness of his best cops. He's very funny, as is Lawrence, who finds some fresh notes in the screen persona he's been playing since he debuted in House Party. Lest I forget that, like so many other recent action movies featuring older stars, this movie gives us a crew of newfangled youths whose knowledge of computers bumps heads with the more hands-on approach of their elders. Here, it's Ammo, a new unit run by Mike's old flame Rita, Paula Nunez, and featuring Vanessa Hudgens from High School Musical and Spring Breakers. Their use of drones and hacking is mocked by the old school police officers, so it's only a matter of time before Emo is forced to use actual ammo to get their jobs done. While Emo prepares for battle, Rita and Mike generate some believable rom-com sparks. Perhaps the only surprise in Bad Boys for Life is its desire to embroil us in an emotional stake for Mike and Marcus. Not in the superficial, buddy-buddy, romantic way you'd expect, but in a sincerely earnest way that is kind of off-putting when you remember how Bay's films avoided any semblance of warmth. Dare I say that directors Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah steal a page from the Old Man's Lament playbook that Boyd Payne and Glory and The Irishman, and that Smith and Lawrence do their best to try and pull it off. I had a too much, too little, too late reaction to these attempts to fully humanize Mike and Marcus, but your mileage may vary here. If nothing else, I appreciated the attempt. What I didn't appreciate was the ridiculous, Marvel-style post-credits sequence that sets up a potential Bad Boys 4, The Return of Thanos or something like that. What about all that talk of one last time between Mike and Marcus? We didn't need this time, let alone the next. But I digress. While I'm marginally not recommending this one, I'll let you in on a little secret. If this were on cable at 3 a.m., I'd watch the hell out of it. 17 years, to be exact. 2003 was the last time we saw Will Smith and Martin Lawrence take down drug lords and damn near blow up an entire city. Does the passage of time mean that they've slowed down at all? Bad Boys for Life answers that question, but not in a way you might expect. The plot is nothing we've seen before, nor does it really need to be. Mike, Smith, and Marcus, Lawrence, are still doing their thing, having worked Miami PD's narcotics division for 25 years. With Marcus recently becoming a grandfather, all he wants to do is retire and chill on the couch. Mike, on the other hand, is perfectly happy living his extravagant lifestyle, arresting/killing criminals as long as he can. However, a brutal attack led by Isabel Aredes, Kate Del Castillo, a brutal cartel leader with a personal vendetta against Mike, forcing the pair to team up one last time to stop her and her equally brutal son Armando, Jacob Scipio. It's important to note that Bad Boys for Life is the first one not directed by creator/master of disaster Michael Bay, who stayed on as producer and makes a cameo, but rather by up-and-coming pair Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah. This change is very noticeable. Having experienced Bay's chaotic style once more in the ridiculously fun 6 Underground last month, I did find myself at times missing the unrelenting insanity of Bad Boys 2. By no means does this mean this movie's lacking in cool action moments or style. There's a fun motorcycle chase around the halfway mark that beautifully captures Miami, and Martin Lawrence holding a giant machine gun, in its neon-colored glory. It just never fully reached the all-timer heights of throwing cars onto a freeway or 360-degree shootouts. The same goes for the brief moments where they attempt to emulate signature moments from the series, like that slow Mo 360-degree shot Bay's made iconic at this point. Those complaints are all relatively minor. Where this movie does succeed is from the character work. Adil and Bilall dig a surprising amount of depth from its characters. By giving them time to breathe and deal with the ramifications of their lives, their friendship, and their mortality, it allows Mike and Marcus to feel like real characters for the first time. It helps that Smith and Lawrence still maintain their magic chemistry together. They're still constantly trading hilarious jokes and insults, but in a way that feels much less mean-spirited than the rest of the series. The two clearly love working together and it shows on screen. The same love goes for Joey Pants, who manages to once again steal nearly every scene as perpetually stressed out Captain Howard. Even the new additions to the cast feel welcome. The pair is joined by a skilled tactical squad named Ammo, and each member of the younger cast, Paula Nunez, Vanessa Hudgens, Charles Melton, and Alexander Ludwig, all feel fleshed out and have their own dynamic that fits well. Overall, Bad Boys for Life is a welcome return to the franchise. I still kinda miss the Bayhem, but holding back on the action and allowing its leads to be actual people for once finally gives the franchise a real sense of growth. It still maintains the best elements everyone loves from the franchise while weeding out some of its worst tendencies, while also carving a potential future for the franchise. Let's just hope it doesn't take another decade for the next one. Answer: shoot some guns, blow stuff up and engage in a high-speed car chase while exchanging quippy one-liners, most likely. Or at least, that's what LAPD detectives Mike Lowry and Marcus Burnett do. But after Mike's struck by a bullet and nearly killed in a drive-by shooting, these bad boys have to reconsider their mantra: ride together, die together. Marcus doesn't want to die. He just welcomed his first grandchild into the world, and he doesn't want that to be a world full of violence. So he makes a promise to God to hang up his badge and retire if God will spare Mike's life. Mike doesn't want to die either, but he also knows there's more to the case. The shooting wasn't just a warning or random occurrence. Someone out there wants him dead and isn't likely to stop until Mike is buried. Using that argument, Mike convinces Marcus to trade his recliner and bathrobe for a gun and badge once more to live up to their nicknames, Bad Boys for Life. Capt. Howard, Marcus, and Mike's boss, is reluctant to let them investigate the case due to their personal interest. Oh, and their long-standing track record of creating massive amounts of collateral damage, too. However, Howard knows Mike will pursue the case with or without permission, and the captain would rather have some semblance of authority, however thin, over Mike's actions. So he forces them to team up with AMMO, a tactical division of the police force that focuses on using technology and stealth to apprehend their targets as opposed to relying on brute force alone. Well, theoretically. Mike, who is more accustomed to a bargain guns blazing approach, hates AMMO, and he makes his opinion known to the whole group. However, Marcus likes the idea of having backup. And after the team proves its worth in a few close calls, Mike comes to appreciate the help as well and is relieved when officers arrive at the 11th hour to help round up the bad guys and save the day. Marcus and Mike obviously have a friendship and history that stretches back decades. And even though they occasionally cross the line with harsh comments, they usually make up pretty quickly and stand by each other when the bullets start whizzing past them. After a man discovers a son he never knew he had, he vows to be a part of his son's life. A coach defends his decision to bench a young athlete after the student was disrespectful towards him. Marcus prays in a hospital chapel, asking God to spare Mike's life. Marcus admits that he has been ashamed to pray since his job often requires him to kill people. He asks God for another chance and promises to retire. After Marcus agrees to help Mike investigate who shot him, Marcus tries to keep his promise to God. He avoids fighting and refuses to shoot or even hold a gun, often at his own expense. When he and Mike repeatedly find themselves in kill or be killed situations, Marcus begs God for a sign indicating whether he should join the fray or not. Eventually, Mike convinces him that God has provided him with weapons in his time of need to slay God's enemies just as David did to Goliath, and Marcus agrees to defend himself and his partner. When Mike talks about intentionally killing someone, Marcus warns him that doing so will send him to hell, which Mike admits he doesn't believe in. Marcus cautions his friend to not let darkness swallow him whole and also talks about using his heart to reach people's souls. A woman prays before a shrine dedicated to Santa Muerte and credits the Mexican deity with sparing a man's life. She is also identified as a witch and is often seen chanting. No witchcraft actually takes place, but someone does joke about what her powers can do. Later, someone also jokes that her son was a warlock baby who fed on blood. Marcus wears a cross in several scenes. A member of the clergy wearing a cross performs a wedding ceremony. Gospel music is heard playing in a car. Amazing Grace is played on bagpipes at a funeral. Marcus listens to a self-help audiobook that focuses on God's healing. Someone tells a Buddhist parable. After his grandson is born, Marcus voices his annoyance that his daughter and soon-to-be son-in-law are still unwed. The couple gets married in a later scene and shares a kiss. A man discovers that he has a son from his affair with a married woman more than 20 years before. A wife comforts her husband with a hug and a kiss on the cheek. A man kisses several women on their cheeks in a dance club. A woman wearing a revealing dress is frisked by a cop. Cleavage is seen on women wearing cocktail dresses in a club, and Mike states that an undercover cop should have worn a less revealing dress. A woman wears very short shorts paired with a bralette-type top. Bikini-clad women and shirtless men dance on a boat. Pictures of male genitalia are seen on a TV screen in the background of pictures on a culprit's phone. A scene from a telenovela showing two people in bed is seen on someone's iPad. We hear jokes about sex, male genitalia, pornography, condoms and erectile dysfunction. This franchise has never been short on gunfire, explosions, or high-speed car chases, and Bad Boys for Life is no exception. Villains shoot at each other and at cops with little regard for life, although one baddie obstinately refuses to fire his sniper rifle when an innocent gets in the way. Police officers fire back in self-defense and to protect innocent bystanders. But many shots, regardless of who fired them, result in bloodshed and loss of life. A riot is started in a women's prison when an inmate uses a shank to repeatedly stab a warden. In the ensuing chaos, she steals the woman's uniform and stuffs the warden's body inside a washing machine, sneaking out of the prison in an ambulance meant for the officer. Once clear of the prison gates, she uses the shank again to take out her ambulance escorts. Someone uses a knife to stab several assailants and slit another man's throat. We see several point-blank shots to people's heads, a body thrown from a roof onto a car, people falling out of glass windows and someone using a dead body as a shield. A falling piece of glass stabs a man in the neck. A woman falls several stories to her death after getting shot off a balcony. Explosions are plentiful, especially in car chases when many vehicles are wrecked. One explosion throws a man onto a spike that kills him. Another sends a man falling off a balcony, but he is rescued by his friends. When a helicopter pilot gets shot, the aircraft crashes through the roof of a building and explodes. Someone throws a Molotov cocktail at a car. When weapons aren't available, people use their fists and feet to fight. In one instance, Mike chokes his opponent but releases the man just before he passes out. Police use a taser to take a man down. A woman punches a still injured Mike in the stomach to prove that his wounds haven't finished healing yet. After a guy gets thrown from his motorcycle, a large goose egg forms on his forehead, and another character pokes it. Another man is nearly crushed by a truck while riding in the sidecar of a motorcycle. Mike uses a meat tenderizer to smash a man's hand for information. Marcus is hit in the head with a ceiling fan when he tries and fails to fix it. A woman is told to knee a man in his groin. Mike threatens his captain to go vigilante, and his captain threatens to shoot him in response. Mike has a borderline unhealthy obsession with weapons. After all, who really needs a grenade launcher? And he keeps a fully loaded armory in the trunk of his car. Mike is never seen without a gun in the waistband of his pants. He talks about his affection for police raids, describing them as field trips with guns. A woman lies to her son about who his father was in order to trick him into killing his father for her own revenge. Despite using the same crude language himself, Marcus admits to punishing a child for cursing. He also apologizes to his infant grandson for swearing in front of him. A man is seen snorting cocaine just before police break down his door. Characters drink a variety of alcoholic beverages at parties and celebrations throughout the movie. A man pulls out a box of cigars at his daughter's wedding and sniffs one but is interrupted before he can light it. Capped. Howard drinks Pepto-Bismol straight from the bottle in response to the stomachaches he gets from dealing with Mike and Marcus shenanigans. A man reads an article about a deceased drug lord who was considered a hero in his home country of Mexico. Mike, while usually doing his best to serve and protect the people of Los Angeles, has no problem taking advantage of his authority at times. He speeds around in his fancy sports car even when he's off duty, steals a car to chase a culprit, refuses to wear a seatbelt and convinces his subordinate to secretly hack into a dead man's phone. Marcus tells Mike that he technically died when he got shot, coding 3 times before paramedics were able to bring him back. Dorn, a team member of Ammo, adamantly refuses to partake in any raids or fights due to an incident in which he nearly killed a man in a blind rage. However, when the team is in danger and needs Dorn's help, Mike convinces him to fight, promising to pay for Dorn's therapy later on. When Dorn eventually does go to therapy, Mike and Marcus mock him behind his back. A man is left handcuffed to a table after being threatened for information. When a man threatens to throw up in his friend's car, the friend tells him to drink it. During a children's basketball game, an adult tells one child to intentionally foul another player. It's been 25 years since these self-proclaimed bad boys for life first arrived on the big screen, and not much has changed. Mike and Marcus still dutifully serve and protect as police officers. But the collateral damage they rack up across Los Angeles makes one wonder if all the violence over the years has really been worth it. It certainly causes Marcus to pause and reconsider what he's doing with his life. And he has a good moment with God where he recommits to his faith. Unfortunately, that moment is swiftly interrupted by Mike and his predilection for creating as much chaos as possible. Carnage ensues. The other massacre in this movie is the foul language. Barely a minute goes by without viewers being assaulted by an onslaught of harsh profanities and crude jokes. And although the movie generally steers away from harsh sexual content, suggestive dialogue and skimpy outfits still get screen time. The final scene of this rebooted sequel hints at a renewed future for the Bad Boys franchise. But much like Mike and Marcus, it's probably time for the saga to retire. A quarter of a century after the first installment, can these bad boys grow up and embrace middle age? Aiming for a slightly more serious tone than the first 2 films, Bad Boys for Life addresses mortality, regret and getting older, although any attempt at gravitas is quickly drowned out by the franchise's usual over-reliance on explosions and macho posturing. Taking the reins from Michael Bay, directing duo Adil and Bilall supply loads of energized style, but without the panache or shamelessness of their predecessor. As for stars Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, they don't seem rejuvenated by this reunion, mostly recreating the forced back and forth quipping that wasn't even fresh back when they were younger men. Sony opens Bad Boys for Life in the UK and US on January 17, hoping that audiences have been craving more action comedy hijinks since 2003's Bad Boys 2. Smith has had massive hits of late with everything from Suicide Squad, $747 million worldwide, to the new Aladdin, $1.1 billion, but it will be interesting to see how much pent-up interest there is for this franchise beyond nostalgic diehards. Without a lot of high-octane action movies in the marketplace, Bad Boys for Life should do well until the arrival of Smith's Suicide Squad co-star Margot Robbie's spin-off film Birds of Prey. Cranky Marcus, Lawrence, and cocky Mike, Smith, remain best friends, but Marcus is ready to retire from law enforcement after the birth of his first grandchild, while Mike can't imagine a life outside of being a cop. Things change when Mike is gunned down by Armando, Jacob Scipio, a mysterious assassin working with his crime boss mother Isabel, Kate Del Castillo. Barely surviving, Mike vows vengeance and he convinces his reluctant partner to team up for one last case. The original film had all the Bay trademarks, slick camera moves, male bonding, adolescent banter and leering shots of the movie's female characters. Directors Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah, black, better known as Adil and Bilall, do a decent job of mimicking Bay's high-gloss aesthetic and chaotic editing, although there's a welcome respite from the homophobic, racist, and sexist humor that was meant to be so edgy in the first 2 installments. Although Bad Boys for Life's worldview is far less objectionable, the filmmakers haven't figured out how to enliven a series whose pleasures were always a bit shallow. At the time of 1995's Bad Boys, Smith and Lawrence were TV stars transitioning to the big screen, and so the conceit of having the comics play tough-talking, mismatched Miami cops was amusing. But with Bad Boys for Life, their argumentative shtick has grown stale, with neither character able to surprise us. The perils of aging for men, impotency, gray hair are addressed with obvious jokes, even though the movie nonetheless tries to turn back the clock by giving them plenty of opportunities to engage in the same intense action sequences as they took part in decades ago. With one exception, Adil and Bilall don't unleash anything inspired in their chase scenes and shootouts, although Lorne Balfe's appropriately epic score suggests monumental stakes for these two detectives as they square off with Armando. Scipio, much younger than Smith and Lawrence, has all the taut, brash authority that the slowed-down Mike and Marcus lack. Throughout, the movie hints at a grand reckoning for our fast-talking heroes, setting them on a collision course with a foe who might bring about their demise. Cluing us into Bad Boys for Life's darker, more somber spirit, the filmmakers kill off supporting characters and introduce a late real plot twist that complicates Mike's feelings about this case as well as his perception of himself. But those stabs at dramatic grandeur mostly feel like empty gestures, an unconvincing attempt to convince viewers that it was worth revisiting this franchise. Of Smith's blockbuster roles, the Bad Boys movies remain his least rewarding, and watching the actor try to dramatize Mike's overgrown adolescence is tiresome. Lawrence's high-strung energy isn't nearly as electric as it once was, and the pair's rapport fails to ignite. Thankfully, some of the supporting cast are appealing, including Paula Nunez as the brilliant leader of an elite police force who used to date Mike. Del Castillo isn't exactly subtle as the vindictive crime lord, but her over-the-top villainy is at least unpredictable as opposed to much of this by-the-numbers sequel, which, like Mike and Marcus, desperately wants to reclaim past glories that are far, far out of reach. The action landscape has changed dramatically since 1995's Bad Boys and its sequel, Bad Boys 2. Action movies now belong to long-running franchises like Fast and Furious and Mission Impossible, a PG-13 landscape where characters are borderline superheroes. Where does the story of two Miami detectives fit into all of that? How can Bad Boys possibly be relevant in 2020 when the last film came out 17 years ago? Shockingly, Bad Boys for Life finds a way. Directors Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah maintain the bombastic, R-rated action of Michael Bay's first two movies but manage to acknowledge that 25 years have passed since the first film, and that there may be more to life than simply gunning down bad guys and blowing up the streets of Miami. While the story gives way to some twists that are just as silly as the set pieces, Bad Boys for Life is a welcome surprise that shows a series willing to change with the times. When the consequences of past case come back to haunt him, Detective Mike Lowry, Will Smith, is gunned down by a mysterious figure. His partner and best friend Marcus Burnett, Martin Lawrence, prays to God to save Mike, and Mike pulls through. However, their friendship is fractured with Mike on the warpath to get revenge and Marcus happily enjoying retirement. At the request of Captain Howard, Joe Pantoliano, Mike reluctantly teams up with his ex, Rita, Paula Nunez, and her special squad, Ammo. When the stakes get raised, Mike and Marcus reunite to fight the demons from Mike's past and take down lots and lots of bad guys. The first Bad Boys is fine for what it is. It's a pretty safe action movie with Bay starting to show off what he could do as an action director. Bad Boys 2 looks like it escaped from a mental institution. If you tried to describe various plot points in Bad Boys 2, you'd sound insane. So, at one point, it turns out the bad guys are smuggling drugs in the breasts of corpses. Bad Boys for Life lands somewhere in the middle, retaining the ridiculous action of Bad Boys I while discarding the go-for-broke mentality in favor of a story about the importance of family. The producers of Bad Boys for Life probably looked over at the success of Fast and Furious, said, "We need to get us some of that," and the result is that the lead characters learn the importance of family and growing up. And honestly, it works. Bad Boys for Life may not be the most original action film or have the death-defying set pieces of something like Mission Impossible, but Arbi and Fallah know what makes the series tick, which is the chemistry between Smith and Lawrence paired with ridiculous action. They know that in a Bad Boys movie, subtlety is the enemy, so you go as big and broad as possible. While that may not click with today's mythology-heavy blockbusters, Bad Boys for Life comes off like a charming throwback that can learn some new tricks rather than a stodgy relic. I don't know how much I actually buy the family element the film is pushing, but it forces the characters to develop and change. I like that the movie can acknowledge its lead characters are in their 50s and may want different things than they did in their mid-20s. The only point where Bad Boys for Life starts to go off the rails is when it starts to follow Fast and Furious too closely in hopes for setting up future installments. The Ammo team is good, two-dimensional though they are, and I wouldn't necessarily mind seeing them return, but the twists related to Mike's past are soap opera level nonsense. On the one hand, that kind of silly storytelling goes hand in glove with the ludicrous action, but the film's reality gets broken the more it tries to copy particular beats from the Fast and Furious series. It's better to keep the film simply under the umbrella of family is important and go from there rather than copying plays from another franchise's playbook. If this is the last Bad Boys movie with Smith and Lawrence, and it's possible considering that Bad Boys 2 was a success and it still took 17 years to make the sequel, then the series goes out on a high note but leaning into what works while still adapting to the current action landscape. Arguably, a series about two Miami cops taking down bad guys has been better than it had any right to be, but it managed to break away from being a Lethal Weapon clone and do its own thing on the strength of its leads and the cartoonish set pieces. Franchises don't really end these days. The Ammo Squad is positioned as the next generation of Bad Boys, but Bad Boys for Life isn't a bad way for Mike and Marcus to ride into the sunset. When Bad Boys for Life picks up, Detective Michael "Mike" Lowry, Will Smith, is in the midst of a full-blown midlife crisis. He's started dyeing his graying goatee and his muscle shirts and shiny cars come across as a cry for help more than anything. The film itself is in a similar bind. It wants to be more mature than its predecessors, or, at least, as mature as a franchise that, at its core, is a collection of 80s buddy cop tropes repackaged with Michael Bay's style of bombastic action, can be, but doesn't quite reach that sweet spot between laughing at its own ridiculousness and treating its dramatic moments with the weightiness they deserve. In the end, Bad Boys for Life settles for being a surprisingly entertaining sequel, no more, but no less, that partially evolves the Bad Boys brand. The film begins with Miami detective Marcus Burnett, Martin Lawrence, now a newly minted grandpa or Pop, as he prefers to be called, informing his longtime partner Mike about his intention to retire soon, much to the latter's consternation. Lawrence and Smith's on-screen chemistry remains as crackling as ever in Bad Boys for Life, and it's easy to believe the pair have spent all these years working together since the last time we saw them in 2003's Bad Boys 2. Wisely, the movie doesn't try and pretend the actors aren't middle-aged dads in their real lives either and leans into it, playing up the awkwardness of them reprising roles they originated a quarter century ago for intentional comedic effect. This grumpy old Bad Boys approach might not work for everyone, but it prevents this new sequel from feeling like a misbegotten attempt at letting Lawrence and Smith relive their glory days. Things take a turn for the serious when Mike is gunned down and nearly killed by a mysterious assassin, forcing the, no longer, bulletproof detective to confront his own mortality and face the demons of his past. But in order to do so, Mike will have to work with his former flame Rita, Paula Nunez, and her Ammo Squad, a team of millennial cops, played by Vanessa Hudgens, Charles Melton, and Alexander Ludwig, who, unlike his younger self, play by the rules and use digital era tech to avoid creating unnecessary collateral damage. While it's obvious the Ammo crew was included here to help set up a potential Bad Boys 4, they make for an enjoyable foil to Mike and, eventually, Marcus, especially Riverdale's Melton as the cocky Rafe. Less successful, however, is the villain subplot, which feels lifted straight out of one of the soap operas Marcus spends his post-retirement life watching. Bad Boys for Life is credited to 3 different writers, Chris Bremner, Peter Craig, and its one-time director, Joe Carnahan, so that may explain why it's a bit of a narrative hodgepodge altogether. Filmmaking duo Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah take over as directors from Bay on Bad Boys for Life, embracing a style that, in more ways than one, can best be summed up as Michael Bay-lite. That's actually a good thing, in this situation. As anyone who's watched his recent Netflix movie, Six Underground, can attest, Bay the director has basically become a parody of himself, and it's to Arbi and Fallah's credit that they steer the sequel away from the misogyny, racism, and incomprehensibly edited action associated with Bayhem as much as possible. Bad Boys for Life isn't above cracking jokes about Marcus' habit of being an easy crier, but it also makes room for some sincere emotion in between its set pieces and brings about as much depth to its protagonists as can be expected. The actual spectacle is still plenty bloody and sun-drenched, landing somewhere between the bizarrely wanton destruction of Bad Boys 2 and the explosion friendliness of the first Bad Boys, even if the directors and their DP Robrecht Haviert falter whenever they try and copy Bay's signature low-angle spinning shot. Bad Boys for Life doesn't manage to follow in Fast and Furious footsteps and reinvent an older action franchise for an era where superheroes and world-building reign supreme, yet it proves there's still room for two everyman Miami detectives who are just trying to make the world a better place. It's more effective as an action comedy about Mike and Marcus struggling to figure out what they want in life, now that they're facing north of 50, than a reflective drama about Mike coming to terms with his traumas and mistakes, if only because the latter plot thread tries to build on a foundation that, frankly, was never really there in the first two Bad Boys movies. Still, as a possible and even likely send-off to this franchise, it's an unexpectedly decent one. Of course, nothing's ever really over in Hollywood nowadays, and the film very much leaves the door open for another sequel, just in case audiences decide they want to go on one last ride with Lawrence and Smith down the line. After this one, they may well want to. Full disclaimer, I've never been all that high on the Bad Boys films, something followers of my site probably already know. I say that just so you understand, I wasn't coming at the sequel with any kind of deep appreciation or nostalgia for the series. So maybe it's no surprise that the third and probably not final installment Bad Boys for Life didn't exactly knock my socks off. Going in, I was most curious about whether this new film would simply beat the same deafening drum as the painfully bad Bad Boys 2, or would it actually try to inject something fresh into the series. You certainly wouldn't expect them to just throw aside the big action and comedy shtick that is such a key part of the series. But toning it down for the sake of better storytelling would be a welcome treat. Bad Boys for Life is definitely toned down from Part 2, and to its credit it does attempt to add needed depth to its characters. This time around the one noticeable absence, is Michael Bay. Replacing him is the Belgian directing duo of Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah, who must be into reviving old franchises. They are also set to bring back Beverly Hills Cop complete with Eddie Murphy. Some things haven't changed in the near 17 years since the last film. Mike Lowry, the now top-billed Will Smith, and Marcus Burnett, Martin Lawrence, are still partners with the Miami PD. They still yell at each other constantly. And they still don't know the words to their Bad Boys theme song, but not everything is the same. Marcus is a new grandfather. Mike has broken up with Sid, see Bad Boys 2. Better yet, don't. And the police department have a new young state-of-the-art unit called Ammo, led by one of Mike's old flames, Rita, Paula Nunez. Marcus is ready to retire and let the new generation take over. But Mike is still ride or die and doesn't care for his partner's desire to quit. But come on, who thought this would be a movie about retirement? When Mike is targeted by a violent someone from his past, the best friends get together one last time. Things start off on a strong note, showing more heart than the previous two movies combined. And overall the movie avoids the nastiness of the last film, even finding a way to apologize for one of BB2's uglier scenes. But it doesn't take long for the cracks in the central story to start showing. And despite Smith and Lawrence's efforts, the movie loses steam as it limps towards a rather ludicrous story twist that could only come from the pages of a so-so movie script. The action is pretty kill by the numbers, but it does bail the story out at times. And while Arbi and Fallah may not have Bay's visual flair, they do create some high energy, and controlled, sequences that the audience I watched with really enjoyed. Yes, you could call them silly and over the top, but that's a target these movies have always aimed for, and for the most part BB3's action scenes hits their target. Bad Boys for Life teases itself as the final chapter, the end of the trilogy, one last time. Don't believe it, especially in today's franchised-obsessed movie culture. In fact, the film's title suddenly sounds like a studio promise more than the mantra of its two lead characters. And with sequel and spin-off rumors already running wild, this film comes across as a franchise-building cash grab rather than a fitting send-off to a series that I may not like but that certainly has its fans. It's been 25 years since Bad Boys came out in theaters. It was a buddy cop film that was the feature directorial debut of Michael Bay, yes, that Michael Bay, and starred Will Smith and Martin Lawrence as two Miami police officers. The movie was successful enough to give Michael Bay a career in filmmaking and spawned a sequel 8 years later in Bad Boys 2. These movies weren't exactly great as they feature a lot of Michael Bayisms that would be commonplace in a lot of his movies, but they were entertaining as dumb popcorn flicks, and they were blessed by the comedic chemistry between Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. When I heard that they were doing a third Bad Boys movie, I was skeptical. A sequel this many years after the last one? It didn't sound good. But then the reviews came out and they were much more positive than I thought, hell, even more so than the first two movies, so I was curious to see what the buzz was about. What did I get out of it? Well, let's find out. This is Bad Boys for Life. A series of murders ravage Miami, linked to the prosecution of a Mexican drug kingpin. Mike Lowrey and Marcus Burnett must team up once again to put an end to the carnage while teaming up with a unit of younger cops. Before watching it, I wasn't really excited for this movie. The gap between it and Bad Boys 2 was 17 years, which is a long time to make a sequel, plus, it got a January release, which is usually not a good sign. But I wound up liking this movie way more than I thought. This time around, Michael Bay isn't at the director's helm, but Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah, who are both Belgian. While there is some of that Michael Bay style sprinkled in, the directors do a better job than he did, especially in the action beats where they hold back where Bay would go in excess. There is a sense of cohesion in the story and direction that's missing in the first two, where it was just unbridled chaos. It's not as energetic as the first two movies, but it makes sense considering that the main leads are older and you're not gonna be able to pull off everything you used to do when you were younger. The best part of the movie is easy, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. These two are hilarious and they still got it in their 50s. Their banter and jokes had me cracking up. In this movie, Marcus is now a grandfather and he wants to retire to be with his family more. Mike, on the other hand, wants to keep going and after getting shot, is driven to find the man responsible and stop further bloodshed. The police captain from the previous films return and he was entertaining. I was kinda saddened when he was killed. The other characters are pretty good as well. They introduce a new group of younger police officers, played by Vanessa Hudgens, Alexander Ludwig, and Charles Melton. Reggaeton artist Nicky Jam is in this movie as a drug dealer who works with the movie's antagonist. DJ Khaled is also here and we get a cameo from Michael Bay himself. Seriously. I like how the film expanded more on these characters, especially Mike, who has a connection to the main villain. While we're on that subject, the villain of this movie is much more memorable than the ones from the last two movies, who were just cardboard cutout bad guys. Here, we have Armando Aredes getting back at everyone who was involved with the prosecution of his father with assistance from his mother. But there's a twist. It turns out that this guy was Mike Lowrey's son from when was undercover and had an affair with Armando's mother. So when it came to the final confrontation, I was reminded a bit of Captain America, the Winter Soldier. In the end, Armando lives and is sent to prison, where in the end, he's offered a chance at redemption. If that's not sequel bait, I don't know what is. I give Bad Boys for Life a strong 7/10. Like I said before, this movie is much better than it has any right to be. The performances are great all around, especially Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, the action beats are entertaining, and the jokes are hilarious. It's not the greatest movie ever made nor is it the most original, but it kept me entertained from start to finish, and that's all I ever really ask for with a movie like this. Since they are doing a fourth movie, I am interested to see where they go with it. It's been 25 years since Michael Bay decided to pair the Fresh Prince, Will Smith, and comic genius Martin Lawrence together in their first leading roles as actors. In the 2.5 decades after many things have happened. I was born, the Twin Towers fell, Trump became president, the list goes on. Having only ever seen bits and pieces of the first two films, I couldn't understand all the love the original Bad Boys had in years prior. Every time I caught a glimpse of the originals, they just played out like big dumb action movies, aka Michael Bay's bread and butter. I pretty much dismissed them as Netflix fodder, movies you play in the background while you do other, more important shit. It wasn't until one lonely night in Florida I decided to give the movie a shot. In the first 10 minutes alone, Will and Martin are whipping the porch down a busy Miami street, roasting each other and racing against the clock, to see Martin's daughter give birth to his grandson. It's ridiculous and silly, but that's all of the fun. It literally wastes no time in being fun and exciting. It's refreshing to watch a movie where the plot is simple and streamlined like it is in Bad Boys. In this installment, the duo initially split after Will gets shot in an assassination attempt. This pushes Martin into retirement, to savor his own life and celebrate the life of his grandson. But once old friends start getting murdered in the same assassination plot, the Bad Boys spring out of retirement to find the killer and bring him to justice. In most films, a plot this basic would be a death sentence. I know I would rather commit seppuku with a flaming butter knife in front of a live audience of children than watch a boring generic action movie like Green Lantern. Fortunately, I get to postpone my broadcasted suicide, because the plot is smart enough to get the hell out of the way of the main characters and let the actors really shine. With all his recent YouTube hijinks and familial red table talks, Will Smith has snatched the role of America's dad from Bill Cosby. But here, Will plays the kind of eternal playboy that would make Tony Stark jealous. R.I.P. my boy Tony though. Martin, however, has settled into the family man, comic relief foil Will desperately needs to keep the film from becoming too self-serious. It's a formula studios like Marvel have borrowed and duplicated a million times over. What really separates Bad Boys from the pack is the fact that it's set here, on this Earth, with no aliens, demons, or sky portals to close. It's nice to know movies can still be made exciting without a CGI best friend in the room. Visually, this is a Michael Bay movie through and through. It's got warm, vibrant colors and explosions filmed from every angle possible. However, I will note that this time, Mr. Bay and his team brought tripods with them. Unlike Transformers and some of his other projects, the action here is very visible, making it easy to tell what's going on at all times, even when there's chaos filling the screen. The audio is also well done. It'd be easy to go deaf with so many explosions, but once again Bay and his team take a balanced approach to sound design. Bad Boys 3 never suffers from the quiet dialogue, loud action bullshit that some other action movies suffer from. The film isn't without its flaws, but that doesn't actually matter here. Bad Boys 3 isn't the work of art that's trying to impress the critics. Bad Boys 3 is the film that brings some levity to people who've had a long day at work and just want to have fun on a lonely Saturday night. And it succeeds tremendously at that. Martin Lawrence may not have starred in a motion picture for close to a decade, but he has a special place in my life. When I went to see his dopey 2001 comedy Black Knight, it was the first time I truly laughed with abandon post 9/11. With absolute seriousness, I will be forever grateful. So, while Bad Boys for Life has a completely asinine story, generic action, predictable plot beats, moronic dialogue and truly reprehensible politics, I still had a good time. Lawrence, who can tell an entire story on his face in one reaction shot, must shout "oh shit" 100 times in Bad Boys for Life. Each time it is funny for a different reason. He uses an exclamatory "oh shit," the way Rembrandt used oils. If he was endearing as a young man, he is doubly so at the age of 54, with his Bad Boys character Marcus Burnett, a new grandfather eager to retire from the Miami police force. He needs glasses for distance, is infrequently intimate with his wife, and hears the Barcalounger calling to him. "All our lives we've been bad boys," he says in one of the film's more humiliating moments. "Now it's time to be good men." Marcus's partner, however, the never-married Mike Lowry, Will Smith, is forever committed to putting the baddies behind bars. Oh, who are we kidding? Lowry's modus operandi here, as in the two previous Bad Boys films, is to turn lawbreakers into Swiss cheese with a barrage of bullets, or just blow them up. Good luck finding a film with a more lusty zeal for the militarization of the police force. This latest chapter, directed by the Belgian duo Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah, comes 17 years after the last from explosion auteur Michael Bay, who makes a cameo appearance here. The Miami PD has a new high-tech division with drones and tanks, and Arbi Fallah's camera drools over the weaponry more than it does over the scantily clad Florida women hanging out at the nightclubs. In one scene, when our heroes prep to go out into the field, they are forced to use rubber ammunition or ACLU bullets. Smith, and the movie with him, scowls at such an indignity. The boys' new crew is led by Smith's maybe-someday love interest Rita, Paula Nunez, in her first English-language feature, a striking and tough woman who, by Hollywood standards, is an age-appropriate match. Smith is a mere 10 years Nunez senior. Also in the squad is Vanessa Hudgens, given very little to do, the enormous Alexander Ludwig, playing against type as a hacker, and Charles Melton, meant to represent a new breed of bad boy. The team of screenwriters, Chris Bremner, Peter Craig, and Joe Carnahan, are clearly trying to kickstart some kind of Fast and Furious group dynamic, but of the newcomers, only Nunez and Ludwig have any pizzazz. Regardless, the stars of the show will always be Smith and Lawrence, cussing at each other as they speed through traffic, bashing into things and making things blow up. Apart from one shot that tilts the camera on its side as if you are playing your Xbox while lying down, the action scenes lack any real wow factor. What works, though, are the reactions, the screams, the swears, the quibbling between the cringing Lawrence and tough guy Smith. It's a formula too sweet and smooth to deny. But to simply dismiss Bad Boys for Life for being too far-fetched and violent is to close yourself off from its very real charms. There are plenty of cop-loving action movies that are reprehensible. Lawrence and Smith have that self-fulfilling X factor. If Bob Hope and Bing Crosby had a grenade launcher, it would end up a little like this. The original script of Bad Boys was written for Dana Carvey and John Lovitz. For the youngsters out there, Carvey and Lovitz were quite popular comedians back in the 80s and 90s. Surprisingly, both actors weren't interested, and with the rise of hip-hop music in the 90s, the script was rewritten for then young and hip comedians, Martin Lawrence and Will Smith. Producers Jerry Bruckheimer and the late Don Simpson were in a time crunch. They needed to turn the script into production in just a few months, or Sony was going to pull the plug on the project. Most well-known directors at the time weren't interested in directing the film, so they decided to hire an unknown music director by the name of Michael Bay. The film opened in the spring of 1995, and it's a big hit considering its very small budget of about $20 million. Personally, I thought the series was going to have like 6 or 7 sequels by now, but a sequel didn't come out until 2003, and now we're finally getting a third sequel. As the film opens, dead. Marcus Burnett, Martin Lawrence, became a grandfather while his partner dead. Mike Lowry, Will Smith, still enjoy living the single life. Unbeknownst to Mike, Marcus had decided to retire from the Miami PD. He's trying to convince Mike to settle down, get married and have children. But Mike still considers himself the cool cop in Miami and wants to keep taking down the bad guys as long as he could. One night while out celebrating the birth of Marcus' new grandson, Mike was gunned down by an assassin. The person behind the assassination attempt is Isabel, Kate del Castillo, wife of a deceased drug cartel leader from Mexico. She wants vengeance on those who caused her husband's demise, and Mike happens to be on top of the list. Helping Isabel taking out her enemies is her son Armando, Jacob Scipio. Of course, Mike survived the attack, and after spending 6 months in recovery, he wants revenge. Hoping his partner would be more than willing to help him track down the assassin, but Marcus told him he's retired from the Miami PD and that he can't be part of the Bad Boys team with Mike anymore. Now feeling betrayed and angry, Mike decided to beg his captain Howard, Joe Pantoliano, to let him investigate his own assassination attempt. So Howard decided to let Mike be involved with the ammo team that's in charge of the case, and Mike needs to follow the order of its leader Rita, Paula Nunez. As it turns out, Rita and Mike were once a couple but broke up because Mike's fear of falling in love. That's pretty much the setup of the story. This being a buddy cop action picture, you'll get the usual car chases and shootouts. The screenplay was credited to 3 writers, Chris Bremner, Peter Craig, and Joe Carnahan. Carnahan was actually tapped to direct the picture. He left because of the constant delays in production, but still gets credited as a writer. There's nothing really new in the sequel. Instead of having Mike and Marcus battling drug dealers like the previous films, this one is more personal to Mike. But the film still contains elements of the last 2 films. What's kind of refreshing to me was that the story took its time before unleashing mayhem on screen. Since we're now living in a more PC world, the gay jokes aren't there anymore, and the racist and sexist jokes have been toned down a bit. With both Smith and Lawrence are now in their 50s, the film contains more old people's joke than other offensive ones. I consider Bad Boys 2 to be one of the worst films of the 2000s. It's a loud and obnoxious film with no redeeming quality whatsoever. Basically, it's Michael Bay's first journey into Bayhem. So, I was glad he decided to not return and direct this one. Taking over the helm are 2 unknown and untested directors, Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah. While the look and style of the film is very similar to Bay's, the 2 directors did tone down the flashy camera works and fast editing that Bay seems to love incorporating into his films. Unfortunately, both Arbi and Fallah just couldn't shoot proper action scenes. There were 2 big set pieces that should have been exiting, but they were so badly staged and shot that the scenes looked like some film student actually shot them. Now if the film was a low-budget production, then I can give it a pass, but with a reported budget of $90 million, it's inexcusable to me. I think maybe they should have hired Bay just to shoot action scenes. Say what you will about the man, he does know how to set up proper action sequences and make them look exciting on the screen. Performances were fine all around. Smith and Lawrence always have a good chemistry, and there are some of their scenes together in the film that made me laugh out loud. In order to attract younger audiences, young actors Vanessa Hudgens, Alexander Ludwig, and Charles Melton were part of the action, and of course they're there to make fun of Mike's and Marcus' old age. While I wouldn't call it the best in the series, this threequel was definitely an improvement over the last film. It's less mean-spirited and has more laughs. If you're a fan of the series, then I think you'll enjoy this one. It's just a shame that the action scenes were the weakest part of the film. A quarter of a century has passed since commercial and music video director Michael Bay made his first feature, and rapper and sitcom actor Will the Fresh Prince Smith made his big push into movie stardom, with 1995's Bad Boys, a big, bombastic action comedy extravaganza that is, by Bay standards, unusually tidy and legible. Those 25 years weigh heavily on Bad Boys for Life, third film in the series. Bad Boys 2 came out in 2003, it is not especially tidy nor legible, though with 5 Transformers and 1 The Island having come out in the meantime, it almost looks classicist, and the one that has decided with all earnestness that the right thing to do with a franchise that has only ever existed to allow Smith and Martin Lawrence to scream jokes at each other over the sound of gunshots is to make it a meditation on the aging process and the increasing number of regrets that will accrue to any human life that has arrived in its 6th decade. The screaming jokes are still there, of course. That's one of the things that's weird about Bad Boys for Life, not bad, just weird, the way it tries to combine being a big damn action movie with being a cozy little character story. Also weird is that it almost works. Bey has handed off directorial duties, though he remained to do a wonderfully distracting cameo, to the Belgian filmmaking duo of Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah, credited as Adil and Bilall, and they brought a much smaller aesthetic to the project. It's a much clearer approach to filmmaking than Bey has used since the 90s, with relatively fluid continuity editing and everything. I wouldn't dare to call Bad Boys for Life sedate or any such thing, but it's small enough and slow enough that it leaves room for things to pause for a character beat every now and then. The Bey of 1995 would do that, the Bey of 2003 was increasingly unlikely to do that, the Bey of 2020 is, I think, genuinely incapable of doing that, if his screeching nightmare of an action movie 6 Underground is any indication. That's one of the things Adil and Bilall are particularly good at, in fact. The style of the new movie does a fairly good job of replicating the general stylistic tendencies of action filmmaking circa 1995 and 2003, not necessarily copying either Bad Boys or Bad Boys 2 directly, but capturing the vibe of their respective eras. So the first half or so of the movie has a very particular 90s feel in the slightly flat and soft lighting, as well as the dash of manly melodrama that keeps poking up, and the willingness to merely jog rather than run flat out. The second half runs flat out, and is tiresome in other ways. But most of the unexpected we are old farts material is in the first half, where it has room to breathe. Anyway, the story, Miami detectives Mike Lowry, Smith, and Marcus Burnett, Lawrence, are both in their 50s at this point. Marcus is old enough that his daughter is old enough to get married. And that fact has him seriously thinking about retiring from the fast-moving life of a cop, particularly a cop whose partner is a risk-taking hothead in love with the bad boys image that they pair has cultivated during a storied career. Mike finds this all irritating and horrible, and just as things are coming to a head between the men, Mike is shot in the gut by a Mexican assassin, Armando, Jacob Scipio, son of the psychopathic cartel leader Isabel Aredes, Kate del Castillo. Isabel has just escaped from prison, with revenge on her mind. Mike was the cop responsible for capturing her late husband, and she wants him dead, after he's seen all of the other various judges and lawyers and such involved in the case. We learn this long before the protagonists do. Mike ends up in the hospital for ages, long enough that Marcus retires behind his back, and when he emerges, it's to find that no leads of any substance have been found to track down his assailant. With nothing to occupy his mind but rage, Mike dives into the investigation himself, over the objections of Captain Howard, Joe Pantoliano, who reluctantly allows him to team up with the high-tech Advanced Miami Metro Operations Group, or EMO, a depressingly plausible acronym, consisting of enthusiastic Kelly, Vanessa Hudgens, smug Rafe, Charles Melton, and nerdy beefcake Dorn, Alexander Ludwig, all under the command of Rita, Paula Nunez, Mike's proverbial one that got away. Though it's not so much that she got away, as that he shoved her away for fear of having to form a real emotional attachment. Between her and Marcus, that's two exes that Mike's going to have to reconcile with over the course of shooting at things, driving cars very fast, and leaping away from explosions, and the film has more where that came from. It's not high art, but the film's attempts to explore how being a super cop at 50 is very different than being a super cop at 25 are at least well meant. Not much comes of this, in part because Smith and Lawrence aren't much up to it. Smith is barely hiding his boredom with the material, and given the amount of brand new backstory he's had dumped on him, much of it trying very hard to generate some emotional resonance, that boredom is deadly in some very crucial late scenes. Lawrence is certainly more energetic, but he was also never the standout in these films, the panicky comic figure next to Smith's sarcastic badass, though it's fun to remember that in 1995, Lawrence was the bigger star, and received top billing. Given how generic Marcus's motivations are, Lawrence doesn't have any particular challenges to face, so he doesn't really screw anything up, but he also doesn't have the personality to turn Marcus into anything but a stock figure. The four members of AMO, clearly positioned to serve as the foundation for a Fast and Furious ensemble-style reinvention of this franchise, in the event that this film's sequel hook catches anything, are painfully dull police procedural clichés, other than Rita, and to be clear, she's a cliché, just not necessarily a cliché of this specific genre, and certainly not enough to fill in the gaps when the very muted but still present Smith/Lawrence chemistry is missing. It's an okay action movie, at least. There's a motorcycle chase scene where it even rises up to quite good, a great reminder that practical vehicle stunts have a kind of ineffable presence to them, with the directors and editors Dan Lebental and Peter McNulty honoring continuity of movement and legible spatial relationships even when they're flying around the space at breakneck speed. By the last half hour, it has gotten expectedly loud and tedious, and the final shootout/helicopter crash sequence is by some margin the least exciting set piece in the film, in part because it's obliged to do story work that it's not equipped for. But everything else here, and with 124 minutes to go around, there's a decent amount of action even with the decent quantity of talking scenes, is pretty fun. Maybe not always especially creative or spectacular, but fun enough for a midwinter release. As for the sniping buddy cop banter that has been this franchise's calling card, the result of putting two sitcom stars in the lead roles, perhaps, I'm not the person to ask. I didn't find it funny in 1995 and found it miserable in 2003, and I don't like it now. Lawrence is loud, but not especially amusing, and Smith's on autopilot to such a degree that all of his one-liners feel like they've been laughed at in advance on our behalf. The thing is, Bad Boys for Life is not very fleet movie, like its main characters, it has stiffness in the joints and slow reaction times, and there's a distinct gracelessness to it. Not that Bay's films were graceful, but they at least moved fast enough, especially Bad Boys 2, that you couldn't always notice the clunkiness and the mechanical quality of the comedy. Here, it comes across as very mechanical indeed, stripping away what little character the film might have taken from its predecessors. I don't want to pretend that this besmirches a strong legacy, and it is anyway still better than the second film. But one always hopes that a years later will have some kind of personable sparkle to raise it above that was a movie level, and plugging Smith and Lawrence into a bog-standard I'm too old for this shit template isn't doing it. Bad Boys for Life picks up years after the previous film in the series. Mike and Marcus are still bad boys, but Marcus is starting to feel his mortality and wants to retire to be around for his newly born grandchild. But when a figure from Mike's past comes back to haunt him, the bad boys must ride one last time. I'll leave it at that because this film had a surprising amount of, well, surprises, one of which is that this might be the best film of the trilogy. Bad Boys for Life picks up years after the previous film in the series. Mike and Marcus are still bad boys, but Marcus is starting to feel his mortality and wants to retire to be around for his newly born grandchild. But when a figure from Mike's past comes back to haunt him, the bad boys must ride one last time. I'll leave it at that because this film had a surprising amount of, well, surprises, one of which is that this might be the best film of the trilogy. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence slip back into the flashy suits, bombastic gunfights, and excellent chemistry as if they never left. They're at the top of their game, they bounce off of each other beautifully, and both actors bring a surprising emotional weight to Bad Boys for Life. Martin Lawrence, in particular, surprised the hell out of me, and genuinely moved me in one scene. Smith also hasn't been this consistently engaging, funny, and badass in years. After the misfire that was Gemini Man last year, Smith needed this film, and he absolutely knocks it out of the park here. He's not just the old Mike Lowry, with his quips, quick trigger finger, and flashy material belongings. Those things are still intact, as you'd expect, but in the script as well as Smith's performance, there's a dark edge and a real heart. There are a bunch of new players as well, such as Alexander Ludwig, Vanessa Hudgens, Charles Melton, and Paula Nunez. These four make up the Ammo team, which is a fun little division within the Miami PD. The three younger actors each are a ton of fun. Ludwig and Melton have interplay with our bad boys that garnered a couple of huge laughs from the audience. Nunez has been mostly absent from the marketing I've seen, and that's a shame because I thought her character was awesome, and she brings not only an intensity but also wit to her role. The villain characters, who have also been hidden from the marketing, which I appreciated, are also great, played by Jacob Scipio and Kate Del Castillo. Both actors deliver rock-solid performances. Castillo is very imposing, and Scipio's physicality is impressive. The fact that I walked out of this movie saying, wow, the story in a Bad Boys film was actually fulfilling beyond the explosives and blood-soaked mayhem, is something I'm still coming to terms with. It's been said already, but the maturity of this film in correlation to the last one is undeniably impressive. Bad Boys for Life often feels like a coming-of-age film for middle-aged men. Mike is fighting against his own mortality, while Marcus is embracing it and moving on in his life to enjoy the things he could miss as a cop. Some of this causes some very welcome comedy, but it's also used to give us a deeper window into these two men than I thought possible from the previous two films. I'm not saying this is a character study or something, but they make an effort to define our heroes in such a stronger fashion that, more so than either previous entry, we truly care about these guys, and it makes every action scene seem more intense. The script also really gives the actors more to chew on than ever before, leading to an emotional center I never expected. Tying the villain directly to Mike makes every action the bad guys take feel more personal, and enhances our desire to see Mike take them down. There are some wonderful nods to the other Bad Boys movies, including a returning character that had me shrieking. It's not all sunshine and roses, because there's a late game reveal that I kinda went with, but a choice towards the end didn't track for me. It's hard to discuss without spoiling it, but in the theater, a character makes a change that felt a bit rushed. If they had started that shift earlier in the film or even at the beginning of the sequence, I think it could really have worked. The story ends in a way that could be a truly strong ending for the franchise, but they sequel bait, which is a bit frustrating. They've already announced a fourth film. Hopefully, they don't overstay their welcome. The action in Bad Boys for Life is great, partially because the script does a lot of heavy lifting and also because of how kinetic the camera work is. Hand-to-hand combat is well captured, and they show the actors doing it themselves, which makes it feel even more authentic. There's a lot of what you'd expect from a film like this: car chases, shootouts, fight scenes, and big explosions. It's less excessive than the first film, due in no small part to Bay not being the director, but it all still feels intrinsically Bad Boys. They lean into the ridiculous without feeling bloated, like the finale of Bad Boys 2, for instance. The action all feels necessary, and it's genuinely entertaining. There's a sequence that takes place during an arms deal that features some gunfu stuff that felt very John Wick inspired. There is a scene that features Mike and Marcus riding a motorcycle that had some rough green screen work, but that's my only quibble with the action. Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah do a great job directing Bad Boys for Life. They carve out their own style while paying homages to Bay in organic ways. One emotional moment features Bay's rotating camera shot that was particularly effective, and to that end, they managed to bring the best performances out of their leads that I've seen in a while. The editing isn't as polished as the direction, though. Most of the film is perfectly fine, but there's a lull in the middle section that felt as if it went on a little longer than it really did. The movie picks up again towards the end, but that slack in the pacing felt pretty noticeable. The soundtrack is full of familiar names like Black Eyed Peas, Meek Mill, Rick Ross, Pitbull, and even Will Smith's son, Jaden. The soundtrack is consistent with the franchise and fits the film well. The musical score, however, isn't the best. Now, there are tracks that I enjoyed, ones that enhanced the emotions of some of the quieter scenes, but the score of the action sequences is rather generic a lot of the time. Lorne Balfe is a solid composer, but his last two scores, this and the Will Smith headlined Gemini Man, were both kind of underwhelming. The sound design is quite good though, with gunfire, explosions, and screeching tires richly detailed, and with clear and distinguishable dialogue. There's a scene involving a baby in the backseat of a car, this is in the trailer, that featured the baby making noise behind Mike and Marcus. In the theater, I almost looked behind me to see if there was an actual baby in the theater with us. Awesome stuff. Overall, Bad Boys for Life is a badass outing for Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, with some great action, gut-busting dialogue, a surprisingly mature story, and strong character work. It's not perfect, with pacing issues, a weak score, and a sequel bait ending that feels unnecessary. But, all in all, this might be the best of the trilogy, and I'm stunned that I just typed those words. What did you think of Bad Boys for Life? What's your favorite Bad Boys film? Let me know in the comments below. Stay nerdy everyone. Bad Boys for Life is the sort of thing I suspect we're going to be seeing more and more of, the sequel to a long-done franchise that may now be an all-too-obvious cash grab and infusion of movie star brand enhancement, but doesn't play like one. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence bring their A game, they never let us feel like they're going through the motions. The marks may be standard issue, but they hit them with fury and flair. The buddy movie as we know it came into being in 1969, when it was kicked off by Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Over the next decade, films like The Sting and Thunderbolt and Lightfoot became a new kind of bromantic caper, exciting and even dramatic in a loose, joshing, nimble-spirited way. In the 80s, the era of 48 HRS and the Lethal Weapon films, the genre evolved into a crackerjack breed of racially hostile action cop comedy amp formula fun that was, in its way, starting to fray around the edges. By the time of Bad Boys, in 1995, it had become an almost self-referential form of escapism, one that now played like carbonated nostalgia for the 80s. Produced by Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer, Bad Boys was Michael Bay's first film as a director, and just hearing that can make you wistful with nostalgia for the Hollywood that existed before Michael Bay. 8 years later, the film spawned a sequel, Bad Boys 2, also directed by Bay, which was more of the same in a way that made it seem the quintessence of a movie that no one really needed. So what does that make the reuniting of Smith and Lawrence as middle-aged cops, with 25 years of grudges and tough love between them, in Bad Boys for Life? In its grabby opening sequence, the film invites us to experience it as a throwback to the 90s, the nostalgia equivalent of a double-stuffed ice cream cake. Miami narcotics detectives Mike Lowry, Smith, and Marcus Burnett, Lawrence, are racing around in Mike's glinting blue Porsche, doing hairpin turns in the sun. Actually, Mike is racing, Marcus is getting ready to throw up, with lots of room for bad boy banter so corny it's camp. To a crowd of white people on a beach, we're not just black. We're cops, too. We'll pull ourselves over later. If that's all the movie was, a copy of a copy, implanted with jokes about Viagra and midnight cocoa bean dye for graying goatees, though rest assured, it's got plenty of those, then it might have gotten old fast. But Bad Boys for Life, directed by Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah, the Moroccan-born Belgian filmmaking team who bill themselves as Adil and Bilall, is in many ways a shrewder package than you'd expect. It's been 17 years since Bad Boys 2, and what you feel in the muscles of the new movie isn't just the old mouthy good cop / bad cop routines, but the shadow presence of a blockbuster series that was only, back then, just coming into being, the Fast and the Furious films, with their genres in a mix-master and overdrive approach. Bad Boys for Life is a lavishly conventional cop movie and a comedy of cranky fast camaraderie. It's a meditation on the fine wine of its two veteran stars. It's a Mexican drug cartel thriller in the vein of the Sicario films, with a weirdly personal twist. It's an over-the-top Bruckheimer highway chase and gigantic gun and exploding hacienda blowout. That it works at all is a testament to how even an entertainment rooted in this much formula extravagance can now seem comfortingly old-fashioned. Mike and Marcus, for much of the first half, are cruising on opposite paths. Marcus, slower and more wide-faced than before, has become a grandfather. The two are speeding to the hospital in that opening scene, and he wants to do nothing so much as retire. Whereas Mike, still lean and mean, is a solo vessel who plans to chase crooks for the rest of his life. It's his purpose, and his high. What brings the two back together is Isabel, Kate del Castillo, the wife of the Mexican drug lord they put away years ago, and her hothead son, Armando, Jacob Scipio. The two have devoted themselves to the vengeful cause of assassinating everyone involved in the case: judge, forensic investigator, and Mike. Armando, who is doing the killing, is extremely good at it, coldly sociopathic, an ace sniper, and he's like Bruce Lee with knives. He gets to Mike fairly quickly, wounding him with a round of bullets, then posts the video of the attack online. This development lends the movie a surprise touch of gravitas, at least, for a bad boys caper. It literalizes the thing Mike and Marcus are both confronting and, in Mike's case, fighting, that by the time you reach this age, no matter who you are, you know on some grand level that your days are numbered. Mike is eager to chase his attacker all by himself, an idea that Joe Pantoliano's capped. Howard isn't wild about. But circumstances bring Marcus back into the mix, along with a special tactical police squad known as AMO, led by Mike's old flame Rita, Paula Nunez, who Marcus keeps insisting that Mike was a dumbass for dropping. He's right. They represent law enforcement through something beyond firepower, which accounts for why Mike is so impatient around them. Charles Melton, as the AMO member who baits Mike with taunts of grandpa, has true star presence. Will Smith acts with his old fast break buoyancy, and he looks ageless, but he plays Mike with a harder edge than before, that gives the film its tiny semblance of emotional stakes. At first, you may think that Martin Lawrence has lost his mojo, but he's just biding his time. As the film goes on, Marcus comes alive, and Lawrence teases his partner with a cynical knowingness that's as dry as a perfect martini. There's a third act reveal that works well, upping the stakes or, at least, giving us something real to fasten on amid all the flashing gymnastic ballistics of the climax. Bad Boys for Life should find an audience, because it builds on its predecessors to become something that's easy to give into. It's high-powered trash with a slight human touch. It's been 17 years since audiences last saw Miami police officers Mike Lowry, Will Smith, and Marcus Burnett, Martin Lawrence. And in those 17 years a lot has changed, most especially in how we look at what the Bad Boys franchise has been about. The series has lived and died on presenting cops as rebels with guns who solve any problem violently, and where women are little more than butts and bathing suits. Much of that was compliments of director Michael Bay, who gave up the reins to Bad Boys for Life to newcomers Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah. They are a breath of fresh air to a franchise that, even in 2003, had massive flaws in terms of presentation. The pair turned Bad Boys for Life into a feature that's lost none of the franchise's fire but reconstitutes it for a new generation. Bad Boys for Life starts not unlike a Michael Bay film would, with Mike and Marcus blitzing through the streets of Miami in a beautiful Porsche. This opening car chase is just one of several action sequences cinematographer Robrecht Havier shoots with a kinetic eye and sense of beauty in movement, whether that's motorcycles screaming through the streets or a massive helicopter careening into view. The pair are on their way to welcome the arrival of Marcus' grandson, which brings with the introduction of characters so memorable in Bad Boys 2 that to lose them would be a travesty. The script, credited to Chris Bremner, Peter Craig, and Joe Carnahan, the latter was originally tapped to direct and his fingerprints are felt all over the film's 2-hour runtime, both honors Bay's contributions but takes the right route of transitioning Mike and Marcus into a new phase of their career. It would have been easy to place the two men as fading totems in a new landscape, where their work in TNT has transformed into the young recruits that make up AMMO. Bad Boys for Life could have coasted on Mike and Marcus being two old farts past their prime, and, yes, there are plenty of dad jokes, particularly at the expense of Lawrence's Marcus, who has always been the crotchety old man, even before he was one. Here, he's a guy who just wants to retire and needs to wear glasses. When Mexican drug cartel leader Isabel Aredes, Kate del Castillo, escapes from prison, she sicks her son Armando, Jacob Scipio, onto Mike for reasons that become very clear about halfway through the movie. Even though Michael Bay is honored, cameoing in one scene as a metaphorical passing of the baton, you can feel his loss. The slickness, the frenetic energy, and, yes, the scumminess is removed, and that's a double-edged sword. There's an awareness that Mike and Marcus would have to be brought into a new decade, and not just by lowering the volume on their tactics. Gone is the heavy use of the N-word, the emphasis on drugs and partying, and, most shockingly, the treatment of women as sex objects. At the same time, you will miss the grandiosity of seeing cars being flung into the air on the freeway. Sure, that same stuff happens here, but it lacks a punch, a flair. Michael Bay becomes the ex-boyfriend you knew was terrible, but you miss the excitement and unpredictability of being with them. That's not to say Arbi and Fallah are slacking. Bad Boys for Life removes Bay's dusting of misogyny and coke-fueled mania in favor of telling a story Mike and Marcus would naturally be in. The two are at odds with retirement, Mike is against it while Marcus is for it. When events transpire that cause the two of them to look at their life differently, it takes them on a genuine journey of discovery. Not only is the audience looking at how the Bad Boys franchise can continue in this new world, but Mike and Marcus are looking at their life as well. Where Marcus has a family, Mike has no one. Lawrence and Smith haven't lost an ounce of love for their characters, and that enhances the power of their interactions throughout this installment. Where Marcus is in the "I'm way too old for this shit" phase of his life, Mike doesn't want to believe the glory days are over, and the script reminds him that what was once fun is now in poor taste. Mike teams up with ex-girlfriend and the new Lieutenant Rita, Paula Nunez, to hunt down the Aredes, and he butts heads with her and her team of young upstarts. The script never sides with Mike, showing up the ammo team as young, inexperienced millennials, but says Mike is a poor listener. He always has been, but now it's unacceptable. Lawrence remains the source of levity as homebody Marcus, and he's still solid. It seems like Lawrence wanted to do less action because he spends a large portion of the film at home or otherwise just standing around. The new team is also just as great. Nunez is a strong foil for Mike Lowry, and though the script plays them as former lovers, there's no added emphasis on a sexual relationship between them. Charles Melton, Vanessa Hudgens, and Alexander Ludwig have varying levels of characterization, and the film certainly implies there might be more for them to do in later installments if this is successful. Kate del Castillo is pretty pointless as Isabel Aredes. She honestly seems like the one holdover from Carnahan's time as director. She would appear in a previous feature he worked on, El Chicano. The movie attempts to give her some supernatural component, but that's more so because she's Mexican and a woman than anything else. Really, this movie's treatment of Mexico is the most stereotypical and in line with Bay's tenure as director. The Latino characters are all drug dealers in some capacity, with visits to Castillo in Mexico City that are predominantly her praying to Santa Muerte, the patron saint of most movie Mexican villains these days. It doesn't help matters that the film's big twist doesn't exactly fall in line with the franchise's timeline if you saw the first Bad Boys. Bad Boys for Life is far better than anyone could have expected. I'd be interested in seeing Arbi and Fallah continue with the franchise from here. The ending certainly implies there's more gas in the tank for these characters. Smith and Lawrence remain so wonderful. I missed Mike and Marcus after 17 years, and it was a happy day seeing them again. Bad Boys for Life is the third installment to the Bad Boys franchise, with Miami's buddy cop duo Detective Mike Lowry, Will Smith, and Detective Marcus Burnett, Martin Lawrence, facing a new enemy, old age. Oh, and a new leader of a Miami drug cartel hell-bent on making Mike suffer as well. While the two detectives may be getting on in years and having to rely on a younger, newer generation of police backup to assist them in getting the job done, they show these cocky upstarts they still have the magic, the humor and the ass-kicking abilities to make another worthwhile action movie to push the franchise forward one more time, though a fourth movie will be made at this time of writing, so it's not going to be their last ride into the sunset. It's 2020, and Detective Marcus Burnett has just become a grandfather. This changes his life purpose and he decides retirement is the only way he can survive to watch his grandchild grow up. His partner of 25 years, Detective Mike Lowry, isn't too pleased with his friend's life-changing decision and challenges him to a running race. If Marcus wins, they both retire. If Mike wins, they continue to stop the bad guys until they grow really old. The only problem is, Mike is gunned down before they can finish the race by a new adversary with a special link to Mike's past. After nearly dying in hospital, Mike is determined on seeking revenge on those who tried to kill him. But Mike's brush with death reinforces Marcus's decision to retire. Teaming up with AMO, Advanced Miami Metro Operations, a new special task force made up of a younger generation of technologically savvy police officers, Mike goes on the hunt for those who tried to kill him, without Marcus. But as the stakes get higher and the plot thickens, the body count and carnage piles up. Despite Marcus's decision to stay clear from the violence, a traumatic event brings him back for one more ride with his well-dressed, Porsche-driving friend. But it's not going to be as simple as just going in and killing the bad guys. This new villain, Armando Armas, Jacob Scipio, is more dangerous than any adversary these two detectives have faced before, and has a special history with Mike that complicates the mission to stop him. Only working as a team, the old and the new, can these Miami police officers stop this new menace from across the border. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence show that even after 25 years, they still have the chemistry that made the first two Bad Boys movies blockbusters. Much like the story and comedy in Lethal Weapon 4, we're not too old for this shit. Bad Boys for Life takes into account our actors' unmistakable ages, creating many funny moments and great plot points built around the fact they've slowed down and no longer in their prime. Even when some of the humor feels overly forced, Smith and Lawrence are still a funny pair able to feed off each other's energy and natural charisma. No surprise, Smith still does an admirable job of being the ladies' man bachelor. He's rich, handsome, charismatic, and knows how to kick some serious butt. Smith is still in great shape and doesn't look out of place running around and beating up bad guys. Lawrence, on the other hand, is starting to look a little silly. It's great that a lot of the plot takes the action spotlight off him as his character is trying to retire. However, when he gets back into the thick of it with Smith, his jokes aren't enough to make up for the fact that his ass would be grass because there is no way he would survive any of the encounters his character finds himself in. Buddy directors Adil Arbi, Gangsta, Black, and Bilall Fallah, Gangsta, Black, had big shoes to fill considering Michael Bay, watch for his cameo, directed the first two Bad Boys movies. While their movie is a little too long and the story a little bit silly, they've done a great job of making a solid action comedy that does the franchise proud. The action is a great mix of vehicle stunts, shooting, hand-to-hand fighting and the general blowing up of any and everything that fans have come to expect. Bad Boys for Life is an entertaining addition to a franchise starting to show signs that maybe they should stop now while it's still strong. It ticks all the boxes for action and comedy, though some of the jokes feel forced and the silliness of putting these middle-aged detectives through these stunts defies belief. Introducing a younger team of police officers to assist the original cast is generally a sign there's not much left in the tank, and it may be wise to retire them with some dignity left. I don't have a problem with getting a little ridiculous, and it's still a funny film built around the tried and true themes of loyalty, friendship, and family. There comes a time when trying to outdo previous films with an older action character becomes too much. I'm looking at you, Die Hard franchise. Bad Boys, watch a gonna do when they come for you and you want to run but you're also pretty tired, and maybe your knees kind of hurt? 25 years after Will Smith and Martin Lawrence first put their buddy cop routine on screen, a third installment returns to find them facing down middle age, with varying degrees of grace. Martin's Marcus can't wait to retire and watch telenovelas in his bathrobe all day. Even Smith, with his Gemini genes, isn't immune. His perpetual playboy Mike has secretly started dyeing his goatee. But, as franchises with nearly $500 million in the bank tend to do, Miami's finest have returned, this time trading in director Michael Bay, who helmed the 1995 original and its 2003 sequel, for the young Belgian duo Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah, who are likely far more affordable, and seem to be equally in love with explosions. Luckily for them, a good portion of the plot involves blowing things up: buildings, helicopters, humans. Though the movie is always at its best when it lets the chemistry between its two co-stars breathe, when it doesn't, it's mostly interchangeable with any other fast, furious thriller that passes through the multiplex. As the story opens, Marcus wants out, ready to live a life of leisure and grandbabies, and Mike doesn't want to let him go. Neither of them gets to choose their fate when a one-time Mexican cartel leader, Kate Del Castillo, jailbreaks, and then enlists her homicidal son, Jacob Scipio, to help eliminate the people who put her there. Catching them both means accepting the help of Mike's one-time paramour, Paula Nunez, and a SWAT team of bright-eyed millennials that includes Vanessa Hudgens, Riverdale star Charles Melton, and Vikings Alexander Ludwig. It's all silly in that very Michael Bay way. He actually makes a small, winky cameo early on, and in some moments genuinely thrilling. It's also gleefully, almost cartoonishly violent, piling up bodies as casually as Call of Duty, and letting the camera linger while they bleed. Which is all expected. Banter and bullets is the action movie MO, and the duo at the center of it hardly seem to have to stretch to spread their bickering charm on thick, particularly in a great, absurdly comic scene on an airplane. By the shock and awe climax, though, when everything but the goatee pretty much goes up in flames, other things have worn thin. At one point, a God-fearing Marcus even tries to lead his more hot-blooded partner to greener pastures. "We've been bad boys," he pleads. "Maybe it's time to be good men." "Who wants to sing that song?" Mike retorts. And so instead, they go on singing the one we know. If you haven't heard yet, Will Smith is attempting to rekindle his career in action movies. The box office success of the 1995 film Bad Boys has sparked 2 sequels. In '95 the movie was welcomed with open arms with its signature song and the massive popularity of the main stars, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence. This movie helped to propel the career of Michael Bay as a box office master of action and, what my dad calls, shoot 'em up movies. By today's standards, the film didn't make that much money, but by 1995 standards it was a smash hit, making an estimated $140 million on a $90 million budget. Bad Boys 2 came out in 2003 and cost almost $130 million to make and took in $273 million. Again, delivering on the promise of the first movie and, well, when Bad Boys premiered, the Miami lifestyle still had some Miami Vice reverberations and people were ready to see that vibe portrayed again. With audiences flocking to the other hits of the year like 12 Monkeys, Nixon, and the still relevant Seven, we were all in the mood for a light-hearted action flick reminiscent of Lethal Weapon. Transferring the theme song from the hit TV reality show Cops didn't hurt either. This movie didn't let the theater-going audiences down as it delivered a healthy dose of camp, action, jokes, and star power. I enjoyed the movie so much at the time that I bought it. There was no streaming then, and the soundtrack too. Although I found it Meth Lab Trailer Park to play the theme song, so I stuck to the other tracks when there was a possibility of someone eavesdropping on my musical choices. Bad Boys 2 might be considered a better film, and it made just as many people happy as the first, myself included, and now, in 2020, Bad Boys for Life has made itself known. For what, I am not entirely sure, but it might not be something good. It is playing on the same tropes as the past 2 movies with all the throwback lines and situations. Nothing in the film was new and there is no twist ending. The movie is almost a repeat of Bad Boys 2 when it comes to the interpersonal relationship between Smith and Lawrence. Sure, they forwarded the story a touch with Lawrence's family, but nothing has changed between them and Smith is still unresolved as a character. In fact, I would suggest that neither character has any real movement and leave the movie as they came in, stagnant from the previous two films. The biggest issue I have with the film is that it resembles an 80s or 90s action flick a little too much. Most of the scenes were made fun of in one of my favorite movies, Last Action Hero. In the film, they bring all the stupid things screenwriters do to make an action movie move forward without getting too much into the details when they have run out of things to blow up or minions to kill. In fact, much of the movie has those nameless, faceless villains wearing motorcycle helmets, riding motorcycles and driving chase cars with heavily tinted windows. Our heroes can kill as many of them as they want and no one worries about the body count because they are bad guys after all. This movie even goes so far as to have them chewed out by their police captain, who yells and screams like a little baby about how much these two guys wreak havoc on the city. Even after the blistering attack from the boss, the hero gets a new team with abilities unknown to Smith. But, we find out that the team is good, but they don't have what it takes to be a real old school cop like Smith and Lawrence, so they flounder. Then there are the unnecessary and unreal explosions and weaponry. Cars do not blow up when they are shot with a rifle round, motorcycles cannot roam around the city with a military machine gun attached to the front of a motorcycle sidecar, and grenades do not have enough force to push a motorcycle onto its front wheel. But this is the movies, so I may just let most of this stuff go. Okay, I won't. It is just too ridiculous. In my humble opinion, when a screenwriter gets stuck or can't see beyond their own creation's eyes, they do dumb things. Just like in the film Batman vs Superman, the duo is miraculously saved at the end of the movie when the team they left behind in Miami suddenly appears to give the crucial assist. This is amateurish and Smith and Lawrence should have been able to figure this out by themselves. It would have been a way better ending. Instead, the screenwriters wrote themselves into a corner by having 15 or so bad guys attack the guys in Miami. The rule of thumb for writing a screenplay is to make the next set of bad guys tougher than the last. Well, the only way they could do that is to double up on the number of bad guys, since there was no setup for a supervillain henchman, as that role was taken by the subplot of the super henchman being Will Smith's son. Yes, you heard me right, he had a child with the main bad girl. Explained to us in a reflective scene, we find that Will's first assignment out of the academy was to be an undercover operative in a Mexican cartel. Just another overused trope that this movie intends to cram down our throats in an unsuccessful attempt to make the audience care for the characters that fails miserably. Top all of that off with the super henchman, aka Will's son, is captured after turning on his mother and given a second chance to prove his worthiness even after killing the police captain, everyone's dear friend, in cold blood just 30 minutes before. I mean, come on. While I could go on and on about this film, I wonder if it will find an audience that revels in its creation. The world has changed and sensibilities have deepened. Can a 1908 style buddy cop flick hold its own? If so, I can write that. And it would probably be better than this 1.5-star silly movie. Mostly because I always try to avoid clichés when writing a story. This movie leaves me wondering if our society has digressed to the point that a good story isn't as crucial as making stuff blow up. The box office take for this movie will tell us, and I hope it's not bad news. Movies have always been a part of my life, as my mother and grandmother were collectors of sorts. I had a decent VHS collection, and those tapes got replayed regularly. Bad Boys, 1995, was among them, largely because it combined two sitcom stars that I loved with added chaotic action, which would later become the trademark of director Michael Bay, and it was all set in Florida. I was less hyped about Bad Boys 2, 2003, though I was in the theater opening weekend, so I was very unclear how this third installment, Bad Boys for Life, 2020, would go. I'll just say that the bad boys are back, baby. Detective Marcus Burnett, Martin Lawrence, is ready to retire from Miami PD after 25 years of service. His partner, Detective Mike Lowry, Will Smith, is hurt and surprised by his partner's willingness to break up the duo. Mike seeks to bring Marcus back after it becomes clear that someone is trying to kill him, and needs his partner to watch his back. The biggest thing that makes this movie work is the chemistry between Smith and Lawrence. It was definitely a big factor for all three films, but here it was great seeing them together. Smith has had a series of less than stellar films, even if he was bringing his A game. It has been even longer of a drought for Lawrence, so, when this film was even announced, it sounded like grasping for that one last chance at a hit type of movie. However, this is great, because filmmakers Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah definitely seem to be aware of that perception, and I feel they built it into the story a bit. It should be noted that the chemistry of the partner detectives would not be complete without their nervously angry captain played by Joey Pants Pantoliano, who also returns. Ultimately, this movie had me pretty much from the opening car chase. To make a sequel great, you've got to up the stakes a bit. Bad Boys 2 tried, and in my opinion, it ultimately failed to do it in a way that meant anything significant, and then it jumped the shark in the third act. Bad Boys for Life, on the other hand, introduced new characters that were interesting, put an action movie trope in its crosshairs, and actually had quite decent storytelling that I think will reward attentive audience members and multiple viewings. The best thing about this movie was feeling emotionally invested in these characters, and the movie not ignoring that fact. These aren't action figures being moved from one set piece to another with no stakes attached to them. There is a lot for Marcus and Mike to lose, and because the filmmakers take the time to ensure we care about that, the movie connects in a bigger way than it did in Bad Boys 2. As per usual, I avoid talking about spoilers in my reviews, especially because I tend to write them soon after the film is released. In this case, it is hard to talk about what I love in this movie, outside of the characters, because the plot is full of little twists, some for comedic reasons, and others for dramatic ones. While I enjoyed the new characters and their team called Ammo, played by Paula Nunez, Vanessa Hudgens, Alexander Ludwig, Charles Melton, plus the somewhat comic book-inspired villains, the film still had some weak spots. Most of the jokes landed, but there were a few that were cheesy or predictable. There was definitely an homage to Michael Bay with some of the cinematic choices, and I don't always love the chaotic action sequences that follow. Still, I was pleasantly surprised with Bad Boys for Life, with it earning the not quite golden Ponyboy rating. I will probably garner a lot of flack for saying this, but I don't care. I am unapologetically in love with R-rated Michael Bay movies, that includes both Bad Boys 1 and 2. No, I will not take that back. My father and I would watch the first two films on practically an endless loop for years because we enjoyed the living hell out of them. The Bad Boys movies are fun, gloriously hard R, darkly hilarious slaughterhouse action pictures with awesome chemistry between Martin Lawrence and Will Smith. Are they masterpieces? F***ck yes they are, masterpieces at being bad boys, and that's all I care about. There is no need for them to be the Serpico of the 1990s or 2000s, they need to be sheer entertainment with fantastic banter between their leads amidst all the beautiful carnage in the Miami Magic Hour streets. That is Bad Boys, and that is exactly why I love the 2020 continuation as well. Bad Boys, Mike Lowry, Will Smith, and Marcus Burnett, Martin Lawrence, are at it again with another set of baddies trying to ruin their day. This time around, however, it seems that the duo are at completely different junctures in their lives, as Marcus is determined to settle down while Mike is more hell-bent than ever to live the action hero life no matter the cost. When a hitman is sent to kill Mike for mysterious reasons, it's up to the bad boys to solve the case and put an end to this personal war brought to their doorstep. For me, when it comes to the true enjoyment of a Bad Boys movie, it comes down to the chemistry between Marcus and Mike, played respectively by Lawrence and Smith. They squabble and bicker time and time again, but there always needs to be a sign of heart between them. A semblance of showing that they genuinely care for one another as metaphorical brothers, that is the heart and soul of any Bad Boys flick. Bad Boys for Life carries that tradition effortlessly. Yes, they are getting into hilarious arguments throughout the movie and mainly about Marcus trying to retire or depart in some way from Mike yet again. Instead of feeling old or redundant at this point, it makes sense why the subject rears its angry little Martin Lawrence head again. Marcus has recently become a grandfather, he feels as though that he has served his purpose in bettering the streets of Miami, plus when we get to a more emotional moment within their story it all adds up further. Acting-wise, the duo doesn't miss a beat. These feel completely authentic to the characters that they had built upon in the previous two movies with everything we love about them. Hell, there are times where Will and Martin are acting their whole hearts out so much that I'm positive if this were a drama then it would last minute have been included in this year's Oscar nominations for Best Actors. They are that good and they inject a massive amount of love in their performances for their characters. Not to mention, they are so goddamn funny. They really are. I don't think there was a single moment when these two were sharing the screen that I wasn't laughing and having a great time. To see Lawrence and Smith back together again makes me smile from ear to ear and I truly hope that we have more to come very soon. Not another 10 to 15 years soon though because that'll just piss me off. Bad Boys for Life is Will Smith's third straight movie, following Gemini Man and Spies in Disguise, to deal with issues of legacy, cultural footprint, and the cycle of violence merely allowing the world to go blind. Smith's last handful of projects, give or take Aladdin, suggests a certain reckoning with his legacy as a bread and circuses movie star, as well as a certain distaste of the overriding individual right societal right mentality of the classic action hero. That's not to say that Bad Boys for Life is a grimdark reckoning on Michael Bay/Jerry Bruckheimer pop culture, which itself heavily influenced the MCU, but it has more on its mind that comic violence and franchise nostalgia. It is to Sony's credit that much of the movie will enter theaters Thursday night relatively unspoiled, and that there are genuine surprises to be found. Will Smith's Mike Lowry is still kicking butt while looking good, while Martin Lawrence's Marcus Burnett is considering retirement following his first grandchild. The core plot involves a mother/son foe, Kate Del Castillo and Jacob Scipio, who is attempting to put Mike into early retirement. This development sees the old friends going back to old habits while teaming up with a young, tech-savvy posse, Vanessa Hudgens, Alexander Ludwig, and Charles Melton, of new wave cops led by Mike's former flame, Paula Nunez. But Lowry's desire for vengeance may make him his own worst enemy. In preparation for Bad Boys for Life, I watched the previous two Bad Boys films from 1995 and 2003. This research coincided with the Jeopardy! Greatest of All Time tournament, which featured especially hard clues designed to challenge the brainiac players. It was an interesting balance of opposite ends of the IQ spectrum. When Jeopardy! Had my brain short-circuiting, I turned on Bad Boys to cool it down. When Bad Boys had my brain flatlining, I turned on Jeopardy! To bring it back to life. By the end of the week two things were clear, that I should never get within 500 feet of the Jeopardy! Set, and that the Bad Boys franchise was just as explosive and dumb as I expected from pre-Transformers Michael Bay. The new film isn't directed by Bay, but new helmers Adil Arbi and Bilall Fallah are clearly following his blueprint very closely, for better or worse. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence are back as Miami detectives Mike Lowry and Marcus Burnett, respectively. Mike wants to keep chasing bad guys for all eternity, while Marcus wants to retire to spend time with his family, which now includes a grandchild. And of course their captain, Joe Pantoliano, just wants them both to stop giving him ulcers. Imprisoned cartel queen Isabel, Kate Del Castillo, and her son Armando, Jacob Scipio, have plans to see that these people don't get what they want. During Isabel's inevitable escape, she comes across an overturned fruit cart. Doesn't this movie know that it's supposed to show the senseless destruction of the fruit cart during a chase scene? An assassination attempt on Mike leaves him unable to pursue Isabel and Armando himself. but he can consult with an upstart unit led by potential love interest Rita, Paula Nunez. Mike clashes with the younger officers in the unit, Charles Melton, Vanessa Hudgens, and Alexander Ludwig, who mean well but aren't proactive, i.e. ready to go into a situation with guns a-blazing, like him. What he really needs is Marcus back, but his old partner has committed himself to nonviolence. This obstacle lasts for about a scene and a half before Mike has Marcus do some mental gymnastics to make him reckless and deadly again. The Mike/Marcus relationship is given a moderate amount of attention, though thankfully not so much that Martin Lawrence is allowed to really annoy me like in the first movie. The relationship between Mike and Rita and her team is given minimal attention, mostly limited to arguments over the team's observe, don't get involved position. Vanessa Hudgens is not in the movie nearly enough to justify her third from the top billing. There's a lot of development given toward the relationship between Mike and the villains at the end. The storyline culminates in a tease for another sequel, which makes me wonder if the studio's marketing team regrets calling the third movie Bad Boys for Life when saving the title for the fourth movie and calling it Bad Boys for Life makes much more sense. Your opinion of Bad Boys for Life will depend heavily on how you feel about movies that pride themselves on being dumb, but fun. Here's a test. There's a scene where the characters go into a showdown at a Mexican church filled with stained glass windows. Are you rubbing your hands in anticipation of all the glass breaking? If so, this is the movie for you. If not, you probably won't like the glass breaking or all the shooting and explosions that take place long after the movie has run out of glass to break. I'm of the opinion that the action should last only as long as there's glass to break. This film, directed by Adil Arbi, screenplay by Chris Bremner, story by Peter Craig, based on characters, produced by Jerry Bruckheimer, starring Will Smith, cinematography Robrecht Havierd, edited by Dan Lebental, music by Lorne Balfe, production companies Columbia Pictures, distributed by Sony Pictures Releasing, release date January 17, 2020, running time 124 minutes, country United States, language English, budget $90 million. Box office $426.5 million.